Hello everyone, it's Kelly Beatty again coming to you live from the Chelmsford Senior Center. It is late October, it's a Monday night. You know what that means, it's time for our fall session of the town meeting. And this is going to be a very unusual town meeting, perhaps one like you've never seen before. For starters, there are only 14 articles on the town meeting warrant. That's a fairly low number. Now you know that in the spring town meeting, that's when we tackle the tough budget issues, capital planning, and sort of set the course for the town for the coming year. The fall town meeting is usually reserved for zoning bylaws, some housekeeping things, and a little tidying up. Well, it's a very different scene here this year. As you might have noticed, there has been, in the news, there has been quite a bit of discussion about what's going on with the school. Two things. First of all, the school department budget, which a recent audit has shown is showing about a $500,000, roughly a $500,000 deficit. And of course, we're not nearly through this fiscal year, which runs through next June. So that's one issue. The second is that we have a fairly substantial amount of free cash left over from fiscal 2014, about $2.5 million. And there are various players that would like to have some of that. For example, it clearly will, in some measure, go to offsetting the school department deficit. There is something called Other Post-Employment Benefits, or OPEB, which is the money that is set aside to pay for pension benefits into the out years for municipal employees and school employees. There is the Stabilization Fund, which is our sort of rainy day fund. And our sort of benchmark going forward is to have at least 5 to 10% of our annual budget in that stabilization fund in case something like, a recession were to happen. So in fact, that money got drawn down quite significantly in 2008 and 2009. It's been growing back, and Town Manager Paul Cohen wants to see more of that money put forward. And then finally, there is the notion of an actual tax rebate to the taxpayers, both the residents and the businesses here in town. One of our current selectmen, Bob Joyce, campaigned on that heavily in the last April election, and there is a fair amount of support for that notion. Because of all that, and because of the uncertainty in the school department budget, 5 of the articles on tonight's 14-article warrant are not going to be taken up tonight, and in fact won't be taken up next Thursday or the following Monday night. They are going to be deferred until November 17th. Paul Cohen, I'm sure, will have plenty to talk about in the minutes ahead, so I'm going to turn it over to moderator John Curlin for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. I'd like, would George Zaharoulis, apparently there's a problem with your voting device, so if you can please go to the check out people, they will correct that for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
How do they know already?
I'm sure that Chief Curran would like me to announce the location of the fire exits. You will note that they are on the sides of the building, of the room on both sides, and you also can exit in the rear. I've also been asked to request that if you have to leave the meeting early, would you kindly drop off your electronic voting devices with the checkers in the front hall? It'll just make it a lot easier when the meeting's over if they've already put them away. Although we've dispensed with the introduction of the town officials, we do have 3 new Finance Committee members who I would like to introduce you to this evening. James Clancy, Catherine Duffett, and Margarita Calaviotis.
All right.
I'm sorry that I have to go through this again, but I would like to welcome all the town meeting reps to tonight's meeting. You will notice that we have 2 screens to try to address the difficulty that some representatives have had reading the articles on which you will be voting. The warrant articles will appear on both screens, as will any amendments. However, the voting results will only be available on the screen to my right. I would like to thank Chelmsford Telemedia for their assistance in trying to address this issue, and we will continue to work to ensure that all of you have the ability to read not only the warrant articles as originally presented, but also as amended. Speaking of amendments, all amendments will be submitted on the forms, which you can get either on the desk over there or through Onorina Maloney, the town clerk. If you know prior to town meeting that you intend to file an amendment, you can see either myself or Onorina prior to the meeting for the form, or you can email amendments to me prior to the meeting, and I will make the necessary copies and distribute them to town council and the typist so that these will be ready before town meeting begins. And if you get it to either of us prior to the introduction of that article, town council should have the opportunity to review the amendment, which will expedite the meeting. This form will create an original in 3 copies. The top white copy should be returned to me, the yellow copy to the amendment assistant, which will be whoever's sitting at the table there with the computers and the projector. The pink copy goes to the town clerk, and you retain the orange copy for your own records. All questions and debate shall emanate from the microphone facing the moderator in the center of the hall and shall go through the moderator. Board or committee members or town officials or department heads may use other microphones to answer questions or provide information to the meeting. Speakers shall refrain from rhetorical or argumentative questions during the question and answer period and shall only ask questions seeking needed information. The questions should be in the who, what, when, where, and why mode. They should not start or end with, "Isn't it true?" or "Wouldn't you admit?" Those questions are left for me. Those are best served for debate, and I would prefer not to have to rule on questions out of order, but I am bound by the laws and regulations that define our conduct, and I will do my best to enforce them fairly and respectfully. I will allow a reasonable amount of time for follow-up questions, but I will have to intervene if any individual is asking any excessive number of questions or follow-up questions. With respect to debate, speakers are encouraged to be brief. Please do not refer to any prior speaker by name. The proper designation is to call him or her the previous speaker. Please refrain from personal attacks. Challenging or arguing in opposition to another's position is fair game, and that's what this meeting is all about. Intentional slander against any individual or group cannot be tolerated. Let us refrain from repeating arguments that have already been made, but new ideas or distinctions are welcome and encouraged. Discussion of pending litigation will not be permitted unless specifically included in the warrant article being debated. If during the course of debate I observe several speakers on one side of an issue but none in opposition, I will interrupt debate to inquire if there are any who wish to express an opposing position or offer an amendment. If there are none, I shall end debate and move the question. If there is opposition, I will move that party to the front of the line and allow debate to continue. I trust you will all appreciate how this will advance our mutual goal of moving town meeting along. To those who may be next in line, should I ever have to exercise this process, you have my apologies in advance. There will not be any debating from the sponsor's podium. They may answer questions during question and answer and during debate, but should they want to engage in debate, they will have to queue up in line like everyone else. A person should not speak a second time until everyone has had an opportunity to speak, unless the previous speaker wishes to correct or dispute a statement of fact made by a previous speaker. This privilege will be narrowly construed by the moderator. Out of respect for the presenters and your fellow town meeting reps, I must respectfully request that there be no conversations at your table. If I can hear background discussions here, it means that there may be reps who cannot hear the discussion, questions, and answers, or debate. If you need to discuss anything, kindly leave the room out of respect for your other representatives. Thank you. Right now, we're going to check the electronic devices and declare a quorum. So if you will kindly press your electronic device, we will make sure that all of you can vote properly and determine whether or not there's a quorum.
Oh yeah, it only goes, the clicker or is it only going to go to one? It doesn't.
We do have some new town meeting representatives, and for those of you who are not familiar, number 1 is an aye vote or yes, number 2 is no, and number 3 is an abstention. And the voting process will permit 35 seconds for you to vote. Okay, we have a quorum.
106.
We don't have a quorum?
Oh, no, we do.
What? Oh. Okay. Yes. Okay. If you'll see someone at the checkers table, I'm sure that it's merely replacing batteries or something, hopefully.
You get in trouble.
At this time, I would like to turn the meeting over to the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. Yes.
Would it be possible for them to push the screen angled a little?
I wish they could.
Oh, okay.
Chairman?
Thank you, John. As you know, every fall town meeting, we recognize town meeting representatives who have reached a significant milestone in their service to town meeting, that being their first 10-year anniversary. Tonight, we have 2 such members, so I'm going to read the certificate of achievement, and then I will call out the names of those 2 people. So this certificate of achievement will be presented in recognition of service to the town of Chelmsford as a town meeting representative. The community is grateful for the dedication and thoughtful deliberation of issues that have come before town meeting during your years in that position. This example set by you and your fellow long-standing town meeting members serves as an inspiration to all who strive to match your determination to honor this civic obligation. The Chelmsford Board of Selectmen do hereby acknowledge the personal sacrifices and extraordinary commitment required to achieve this significant milestone and recognize that this distinction has been earned by maintaining the respect and support of all Chelmsford residents. Congratulations on many years of faithful and consistent service to the town of Chelmsford. This is signed by Pat Wojcik, Janet Askenberg, Bob Joyce, Matt Hanson, and George Dixon, and sealed by Honorina, the town clerk, and is awarded tonight to Bill Griffin and James Como. Can they please come up and accept them? And I'm sure you know that that was Bill Griffin. James Como obviously is not here this evening. We will save this for him. And also I just wanted to take a moment to recognize somebody who we've missed for a couple of town meetings who's back here tonight. And I'm sure we'd also give a round of applause to Dennis Reddy.
Mr. Manager, Kelly Beatty had
Yes.
made, were you going to do that?
No, I want to invite Kelly Beatty to come up and give a special recognition.
Thanks, everyone. Wow, this is a different perspective. Some of you might know that I serve as the president of Chelmsford Telemedia and its board, and we have a transition underway. This will be the last of what seems like 1,000 town meetings for our executive director, Matt Scott. Some of you have been around here long enough to remember time before we had cable television. It came to town in 1980. There was a contract with Lowell Telecommunications, I believe. And at that time, the school department was handling our public access television. And very soon thereafter, Matt became involved with that. He and Mike Lucas were on the school department payroll, and then very soon thereafter, Chelmsford Telemedia sort of took shape, and we took over that process. Matt has been at the helm all those many years, more than 30 years, more than 3 decades. He has been working behind the scenes to make many of you look good on camera. And I think he's largely succeeded in that. Matt will be retiring and doing a lot of traveling beginning in January, so this will be his last town meeting at the controls back in our production booth. And I just wanted to bring Matt up here and acknowledge him with your applause. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. It's been the highlight of my years.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Kelly. I have reviewed the return of service on the posting of the warrant, and I declare for the record that the warrant has been properly served in conjunction with the law. I would also entertain a motion to waive the reading of the constable's return. Do I have a second? All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Thank you very much. And before we begin, Mr. Manager, I believe there's a procedural motion.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I have the motion submitted before you this evening to have the town meeting postpone consideration of Articles 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9 until an adjourned session to be held on Monday, November 17th at 7:30 p.m. here at the Senior Center. The reason for this motion is we're really seeking additional time to provide and obtain additional information that we can present to the town meeting regarding the school department's fiscal year 2015 budgetary problem. Recently, at a tri-board meeting, the Board of Selectmen, School Committee, and Finance Committee endorsed a request that we postpone the consideration of these major financial articles for 4 weeks, at which time we anticipate coming before you with a set of detailed information and recommendations. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. I don't know if any of the boards have had a chance to vote on this at all, so I'm assuming that they have not. Now would be the time for question and answers, if anyone has any questions or answers. There being none? Any debate? There being none? All in favor? Is this on the machine, the electronic voting machine? Yes. Okay, then, again, number one is a vote in favor of postponing those warrant articles. A vote 2 would be to oppose it. And if you are undecided, a 3 would be your choice.
We're still not working over here, so I can't see.
It's unanimous vote. The motion has passed. And Mr. Manager, we'll proceed to Article 1.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 1, as is customary at every annual town meeting session, is to hear reports of town officers and committees. This evening, we have 3 speakers covering 5 topics for this evening. First will be Pat Maloney, who's the chair of the Permanent Building Committee, who will be providing an update on the construction of the new fire department headquarters. He'll be followed by Gary Persichetti, who will be providing an update on the $18 million Energy Services Management Contract, as well as the status report regarding the implementation of the new bylaw and appropriation pertaining to the maintenance of residential sewer grinder pumps. And then finally, our Finance Director, Treasurer Collector John Souza will provide a status report on the fiscal year 2015 operating budget that was approved by this body at the April annual town meeting. And then John, as in accordance with the town's bylaws, will be presenting the 5-year financial forecast. So with that said, I would invite Pat Maloney, the co-chair of the Permanent Building Committee, to come up and present the status report on the fire department headquarters. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Maloney. I'm co-chairman of the Permanent Building Committee. And I'd like to start this evening introducing or reminding everybody the members of our committee. Those committee members are myself as a co-chairman, David Duane, co-chairman, Kathleen Howe, Eric Johnson, Daniel Morse, Joseph Green, Gary Persichetti, and Steve Roberts as our alternate. I'm here this evening to report to you how we're coming along on the fire station. Currently, the project's a little bit more than 87% complete. I did this slide about a week ago, so we're nearing 90% completion. Things are going well. We have no current claims or disputes at this point and don't expect any for the rest of the way home here. Our budget and contingency is on track with no major surprises. It's tight, but we're going to make it getting this close to the end. And scheduled completion is now set for November 20th. We had hoped to bring it in around November 1st, but with a few issues on the project, we had a couple of delays, and so we're looking at November 20th for the completion of that. A couple of photographs for you just to give you an idea of how it's coming along, and you may or may not be able to see these well on the screen, but the top left photograph is the back of the building. You can see the landscaping's gone in, retaining walls, site lighting, starting to wrap up that area, and then a shot of the front showing the area of the new 9/11 memorial that the firefighters put together and presented to the town a couple of weeks ago, and the old town hall. Another shot of the back of the building, and as you can tell by looking, you can see that we're getting very close. And then another shot of the front of the building with the 9/11 memorial, and it's a beautiful addition to the building, and we look forward to turning this building over and providing another valued asset to the community. Looking forward on the committee, and we talk about these things regularly, and this is actually, but for a few updates, this is actually the same slide that we presented in the spring and so on. So talk about the DPW for a minute. As you might recall, back in 2011, we approved a project to go forward and secure an asset with $5 million in funding to start what overall was projected to be a $13 million project. We've now gotten through several phases of that project. We are currently, we've expensed about $8.3 million, but we still have items left to complete. Those items being vehicle maintenance bays, fueling islands, wash bays, final site development, final office renovations, and a small salt shed addition. So we will be looking in the future to get that project wrapped up, as the longer it takes us to complete the remaining phases, the more this project will cost. We also anticipate, if we are fortunate enough, or if the town is fortunate enough to have the Dutton House relocated, we will be looking towards putting a library storage building project together, as well as talk of some school building projects, which might include some science wings at the middle schools, etc. And the final project that we have talked about in committee is 7 North Road and what to do with it after it's vacant in November. So those are the things that we're currently talking about. We anticipate these things coming along soon in one form or another. And that's pretty much it for the overall update. So things remain good with the fire station. However, I do want to go ahead and expand my normal report, which I usually try to keep to 3 or 4 minutes to get out of the way. But the committee, through some discussions recently, wanted to respond to some missives that some of us see maybe in our email or in our mailbox from a certain group in town. And primarily, there's a lot of talk about our projects, our public projects in town, costing 50% over what the national regional, or the regional average would be. So I wanted to talk about that just quickly tonight to allay any fears that our projects are 50% over any other towns. So with this body's indulgence, I'll take you through quickly. Here's our project. We're building a 489 square foot facility with a total project cost of $8.3 million. This is a project that was completed in Franklin in 2008, so it was probably bid in 2006. That was a 22,000 square foot project, and it came in at $9.3 million overall cost. You can guess what the escalation since 2006 would be. I'm guessing you'd be adding $1 million to that building today. Town of Grafton completed their project in 2008, 15,000 square foot building for $6.7 million. You can see these are all very close in cost if you look at the square footage per overall cost. Town of Hudson, another one. This was completed in 2005. Probably bid in 2003. 23,900 square foot project for $6.4 million. Again. So cost comparison on the overall projects, I think you can see that we've done okay bidding this out in a very volatile climate, and I think compared to other communities, we're right in line with where we need to be. Talk about the Department of Public Works project. As many of you may or may not recall, when we first went out, we programmed the building for about 90 to 100,000 square feet. Our first estimates on those projects to the Permanent Building Committee came in at about $27 million. We felt like that was not doable in the climate and that the town would never accept that. So we went back and started thinking out of the box, and one of our commercial real estate professionals on our board happened to see that there was a building for sale. So that was the project I just spoke of, the $13 to $14 million project that we embarked on in 2011. Again, we're into that project for $8.3 million so far. We have a 17-acre site that is functioning and working every day. All groups are there except for one. So I'll just show you what some of the other communities have done as compared to our public works. Town of Chelmsford, as you can see, it's actually a little bit more than 92,000 square feet, but our estimated cost at the end of the day, when we finish this project, will be $13 to $14 million. You can see the building on the top right, office space. We have our salt shed. Compared to everybody else, it's exactly what they have. Town of Lexington completed their building, 78,000 square feet, far less than our 93,000 square feet, for $27.5 million. Again, our cost is $13 to $14 million. Town of Norwood, construction's underway. They just recently bid this project, 53,870 square feet for $18 million. Town of Bourne, Mass, 39,040 square feet at a cost of $12.1 million. So you can go to the internet and find any answer that you want these days and throw something out there. The fact is that we're very much in line with all the other communities, especially where it comes to our DPW project. So if you compare what we're getting for $13 to $14 million when we complete the project, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, and I think maybe the missive was wrong and said we're 50% under. I don't know. Thank you for your indulgence. Appreciate it.
Good evening, Gary Persichetti, DPW Facilities Director for the Town of Chelmsford. I'm going to take you through the Energy Management Performance Contract. I'd like to start out by saying that we're in the final month to month and a half of this project. Out of 29 ECMs, which is energy conservation measures, 27 of them are totally complete at this point in time. Listed there from lighting all the way to LED street lights. To date, we have 2 remaining. Building controls per building is complete. We're still working on the front-end graphics, so that project's sitting at 95%. And the renewable energy to photovoltaic panels, we're at 80% on a whole with the buildings. The Harrington ground mount is sitting at 65, and the DPW is at about 33% complete. With that, during the construction stage of this, you'll see that even though things were not complete, the town to date has $169,480 savings during the construction phase, which is nice to get, and now we'll have all these ECMs working for the entire 12-month period as we move forward. This graph is just a projected energy savings, and what this is it's giving it to you through the anticipated completion, and what it's telling you is that the lighting part of it, as you can see, holds the highest amount of savings, and it'll just show you through the whole thing all the way down to water conservation, which is the smallest square. And then the other chart just gives it to you by ECM itself. So this is by the actual 29 of them, and it's done by lighting as a whole, street lighting, and then it gets in a building envelope heating. And again, it shows you that we have great savings in all these categories moving forward. And then the last page is the original contract sum is 18,126,326. Approved change orders of 147,992, showing you a contract to date of 18,274,328. The issue with this is that's not the real figure. The real figure is 18,116,007. The reason for that is anything that's put in a change order has to be shown, and there were two items. There's a $128,732,000 grant through DOER to replace 2 units on the roof of the high school, which is being paid by DOER. And there was, at the community ed building, there's a DX cooling that was added to that building, paid by other funds of $29,589, which would mean that at this point in time, the project is $10,329 under budget. Thank you. Yes.
Sir, would you please go to the microphone, Mr. Lowe?
Jerry Lowe, Precinct 9. On the page of savings, you have 169,480, and that's, it says at the top, estimated annual savings for measures. Is that correct? Guesstimate of yearly savings?
No, not on all of them, because you'll see some of them are only through 6.3 months, some are 9.3.
What's the guesstimate? I'm just curious what the guesstimate is when everything's all in place, the yearly savings.
I believe it's over 650,000.
Okay.
The solar isn't shown here as well, which is a huge savings on this
Okay.
project.
So for an $18 million project, 600,000 a year, how many, that's like, I don't know how many years to break
Well,
even?
it pays the debt service. The way this was presented at town meeting is it'll take 19 years, okay, to pay this through the savings of it.
Okay.
In year 20, we should receive, I believe, a savings of about 34,000. And then from year 20 on, which solar usually has between a 25 and 30-year lifespan, at that point in time, hopefully we'll be around 500,000 to 600,000 to the town, because we'll have no more debt to pay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm gonna ask Mike to come up here and run us through the sewer grinder pump update.
Good evening, Mike Vasnakis, Sewer Superintendent. Just like to update everybody where we stand with the residential grinder pump progress report. In the week of June 24th, we sent notices out to all the residential grinder owners with the interim contract information until the contract was awarded. We also posted this in the newspaper, and it was available on the town website. The town officially took over responsibility for maintaining the grinder pumps on July 1st, and until a contract was awarded, we continued using F.R. Mahoney as the primary service provider. In July and August, specifications and legal wording were put together for the RFP for this, for the inspections and maintenance for this project. They were advertised and bids were received. September 15th, inspection and repair contract was awarded to Weston and Sampson Services, and that was awarded for a 3-year contract. In September, we started weekly meetings with Weston and Sampson. They had 5 personnel meeting with us on a weekly basis and in contact during the week, and reviewing what the inspection requirements were per the specifications and make sure everything was included, and how we would handle the reporting, data collection, data storage, etc. So, September 23rd, the town letter and Weston and Sampson informational and contact brochure was mailed to all the grinder owners. And September 29th, Weston and Sampson started inspections and repairs. One crew is currently performing the work in town, and this was decided until any bugs were worked out with the data collection and reporting that was done. So we've had one crew of 2 technicians out there right now performing the work, the inspections, and the repairs. And in talking with Weston and Sampson, they're just about ready to add a 2nd crew. So what's it cost to date? And we haven't received all the bills for the July, August, September period yet. But for the 3-month period, and continuing into this month, we're averaging between 7 and 8 covered calls, repair calls per month. We've had 13 overtime call-outs, 7 non-covered call-outs, and those are basically issues dealing with misuse, warranty issues, or just the units were not covered because they were over a 2-family or they were commercial. People had some questions, and we just answered all the calls and checked out. There were some residences that were classified, that were not classified, that upon inspection we found out that they were, for example, a 3-family house, not a 2-family as originally thought. So we've also run into several custom installations, and a custom installation is something other than a prefabricated unit. It's something that either a contractor has put together for a residential home. And so we've run into 2 of those. We ran into another one this past week. We've had 6 cores replaced. We've had 3 major rebuilds, and we consider a major rebuild in the $1,000 to $2,000 range. The cores are probably averaging, just in the repair costs, probably in the $2,500 range. We've had minor repairs, 12 of them at less than $1,000. So we've paid to date $24,252 in contracted repairs to primarily F.R. Mahoney. Again, I said all the bills are not in for that month, for the August time period. We've had also $2,500 in town overtime. We did have a town personnel go out on any overtime calls during that time. We've had over 60 hours in non-overtime call-outs and administrative time for repairs. So we've been spending quite a bit of time in the office with the departmental assistant and myself trying to file, document, and get this program going. I've had over 100 hours just for putting together the RFP and contract administration. And again, all bills for the July to the September period haven't been received yet. On the inspection summary, we've divided the town in basically 6 areas, and that's geographical areas. So currently, we've decided to start in, we call areas 1 and 2, is just primarily North Chelmsford. And 28 inspections have been done to date, and 4 repairs. And this is done by FR Mahoney, obviously, since they took over on September. I'm sorry, Weston and Sampson, what did I say? Sorry. And that was up to as of October 13th. During that time period, 12 corrective actions were performed, including a core replacement that they found was due to fail imminently. And so some corrective actions are being done as part of the RFP, stated that if it could be done in a reasonable amount of time, they were to do it during the inspection period. We found out from the preliminary reports that have been submitted for those 28 inspections that 10 of them need immediate corrective action. And by that, it means that the units are operating, but they're going to need to be looked at with additional work fairly quickly. 10 corrections needed to bring the units to the town standard, which we defined what the town standard was. 1 custom installation was noted, but it's actually, we have 2 custom installations right now, and that involve just non-supplied prefabricated pumping units. So as I mentioned earlier, they're usually a tank with pumps installed into it, and beyond that, we're just gathering data to see how many of those units are out there. One crew is averaging 4 inspections per day right now. As time goes on, that will get a little bit better. And repair estimates for everything that we're finding out will be available at the spring General Assembly. There is a substantial amount that will need to be done, and some decisions are going to have to be made as to exactly the extent of what we're going to cover. So the maintenance contract and the inspection contract, just to let you know what the cost came in at. The inspection contract came in at $140,600, and that's for inspecting the 540 units that are out there. The maintenance part of the contract, or the service and repair contract, for the first year was estimated. Again, these are estimates, these are not what we're going to be billed. Was estimated, in addition to what FR Mahoney has already done, another $120,000. Next year, obviously without the inspections to do, the repair budget is estimated by Weston and Sampson at $153,000, and the year 3 at $176,000. This does not include any of the correcting any of the things that we're finding either deficient or in need of repair. This is just for repair call-outs at basically what has been done up to date. So we're faced with a fairly high percentage of units that are going to have to be upgraded and brought up to the standard. So.
Certainly just approach the microphone, please.
Maria Carafellis, Precinct 2. Do you have an estimate as to what all that extra stuff is going to cost us?
No. Again, the only thing we have is what we've looked at so far, either what the town we've been involved with during July, August and September, and then what Weston and Sampson has reported to us here for several weeks. So if you project on that, that's the only way to do it, but again, it's too early to tell. And the age of the units that we're looking at right now in North Chelmsford is above the mean average age, so they probably are susceptible to higher upgrade or repair costs right now.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Yeah. We'll have that in the springtime.
1 second. The November 17th meeting, if we continue to that night, which we're going to anyways, is there any way you would have any more additional information? It wouldn't,
Now, this is...
too quick.
I would expect that the inspections would be done sometime, hopefully in December, again, depending on weather.
Okay.
And would probably need several months to look at and analyze, and then figure out, you know, what the...
So we should have a number pretty much nailed down by Springtown meeting.
I would expect so, yes.
Alrighty, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, John Souza, Finance Director. Back when we last gathered here in May, town meeting approved the fiscal year 15 capital budget. And the way the process works is that although town meeting approves the funds at that time, none of the project funds may be spent till July 1st, although certainly department heads start the procurement process. So this is a report on progress over the first 3.5 months of the fiscal year. The first item I'd like to highlight is a replacement of engine 1 with the ladder truck. And as you see here from the picture, the fire department recently accepted delivery of a 2013 Smeel 100-foot aerial ladder truck. And I'd like to recognize the efforts of Chief Curran and his staff for working diligently to purchase a demonstrator vehicle. And what this did is it shortened the procurement time, lead time, by about 18 months versus waiting for a truck to be built to order. And it also resulted in a savings of $100,000 for the town. The new ladder truck is currently being stored at a town facility. It's being outfitted with specialized equipment, and it's expected to be in service by January. The next item is the replacement of fire engine 7, and this is actually part of the previous year, the fiscal year 14 capital budget. The photo that you see here is actually the older vehicle. It's being replaced, and the department is purchasing a 2014 Smeel pumper truck, and the vehicle is currently still in production, and it's expected to be delivered around December. Considering that town meeting first approved this project in April 2013, you can see that it can take anywhere from 18 to about 24 months between the date fire apparatus is first ordered and final delivery, just due to the specialized nature of the equipment. And in the public works area, there's a number of infrastructure improvements that are still ongoing. In drainage, the department's been working on catch basin maintenance repair at various locations. There have also been curbing and sidewalk upgrades. Road maintenance has been going on, which includes pothole repair, some spot paving, and there was a road project that was completed on Gary Road. You remember town meeting approved two vehicles, a heavy-duty service truck and a sander truck. Both of those have been ordered, and delivery, our Public Works Director expects delivery within 30 days. Moving on, municipal facilities completed a number of projects in the various schools over vacation. The photo on the left shows a new walk-in refrigeration freezer unit that was installed this summer at Chelmsford High School. And if you look at how long this unit goes down in that room, it gives us some appreciation for the size of the unit that's required to support food service operations at the high school. The photo on the right shows a typical storage compartment. And then moving on to the Parker School, the new walk-in refrigeration unit, slightly smaller, was installed at Parker Middle School over the summer. You can see on the left there's a food service employee that's very happy to have the new unit that's functioning. And then we also have the Parker restroom project. This slide's just intended to show you that architectural drawings and plans have been completed for the restroom restoration project at Parker Middle School. Our facilities director reports that a pre-construction kickoff meeting was held last week, and they expect construction to commence soon. Also, going back another year, you remember the McCarthy restroom renovation project. This is a fiscal year 14 project, and there's a few photos that our facilities department provided. You can see the photo on the left shows some of the demolition work that was involved in the restrooms. The photo in the center shows some of the new partitions walls that were installed, and then on the right you see new sinks, faucets, and your toilet fixtures. The facilities department reports that the work's about 25% complete, and work will continue at McCarthy and should conclude by early 2015. Also, our Council on Aging director reports that she's actively working on procuring the 12 to 14 passenger senior transport van that was approved, and she's working on a state bid with the Lowell Regional Transit Authority. So it appears delivery will occur in about 8 to 10 months. Moving on to the technology area, I'd like to invite Anne Marie Fiore, the Executive Director of School Technology, to provide you with a report on the school technology projects.
Thank you, Mr. Souza. We're very fortunate in Chelmsford to have a steering committee, which is the IT Capital Advisory Group. We have representatives from the town of Chelmsford and members from the town, community members, members from the town governance, members from the school department. And this year, for the first time, we've added a representative from telemedia and the Chelmsford Public Library. Basically, because of the fiber lay that was done years ago now, we're all on one network, so it's important that we all are invested in every single thing that we do. I want to give you a little bit of some of the network projects that we've been doing on the school side. In 2010 to 2012, we started virtualization and cloud services, which we give our students and staff all access to their documents and their software. And we've virtualized all of our entire network, and that's good not only for the network itself, but also for energy savings. Unification of the town and school network started in 2011 and was completed in 2013, and I'm going to address that in a slide in one moment. We finished our voice over IP phones and power over Ethernet switches project, and wireless initiative is almost finished. We have 2 schools left for completion. Unification of the town and school network was really the beginning and really an ongoing project that we have, but the basis of it is done now. When I first came to Chelmsford in August 2010, we had 2 of every one of these things on this chart here, and Ted and I worked very hard to put all these things together. From a manpower perspective and from a financial perspective, it made sense to not have 2 firewalls, 2 core switches, 2 backups, 2 data storage, 2 disaster recovery sites, 2 internet connections. We combined our forces and we consolidated all these things into one more robust version of all of these items. Fiscally more responsible and manpower more responsible way of running our network, because the bottom line is we're all inside the same network. Our IT capital projects last summer, the summer just passed, was we're continuing on with the 21st Century Classroom project, which is an infrastructure upgrade for all of our classrooms on the school side, which is a projector, ceiling-mounted speakers, and an interactive whiteboard in the classrooms. Harrington and Center schools both got wireless. We virtualized all the elementary and the middle school networks, and McCarthy was the last school to receive voice-over IP phones, and that was the end of the voice-over IP phone project. We're continuing on with security. We started the keyless entry project in the schools, where teachers and staff are now swiping in entrance with a badge, and we are in year 3 of our security cameras. In that same vein, where Ted and I are working together, he purchased for both of our networks the firewall that keeps our kids safe, and it's IT security, network security, endpoint security
data security and security management for our network. And that's what got installed last summer on the network. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Next, we'd like to take a look at provide you with some highlights of our updated 5-year financial forecast. Copies of the detailed forecast look like this are available when you entered the hall tonight. In this presentation, since you have the detail, we're just going to take a summary level look at revenue trends, expenditure trends, and then look at the overall financial forecast. Under revenue for FY16, our largest single source, as in past years, is local property taxes. Under state law, we start with our levy base, which is just under $82 million, and that's a historical figure based on the prior year's levy limit. You would add the 2.5% increase allowed, estimated new growth, and then $4.6 million for excluded debt for projects for the SOAR, school, and DPW building that have been previously approved by voters. This gives us a total levy of about $89.6 million that can be raised through property taxes. Our excluded debt declines about $389,000 in fiscal year 16, and as we've talked about in past years, that's going to continue a downward trend each year as we continue paying down the debt for these older projects. Oops, excuse me, let me go back. If we go to this slide, just to look at state aid, Chapter 70, aid for education is the largest component, and we're estimating that it will increase about $128,000 for the next fiscal year to $10.4 million. That's roughly an estimate of about $25 per student based on our student population. We're also estimating that general municipal aid, formerly known as lottery aid and additional assistance, will increase modestly by about $100,000 for fiscal year 16. And it's important to note that at this point, state aid really remains uncertain. We are in an election year, and this isn't a political statement, no matter who you're voting for, but the state aid will likely reflect the budget priorities of the new governor. And the next category of revenue is available funds, which we've looked at before. This has a variety of reimbursements from various revolving funds and other special purpose funds. We always included a reimbursement for school child care to cover the cost of employee health insurance for those folks. And also an annual transfer of $2.4 million in SOAR betterments, which is part of our long-term plan to finance debt service for all the SOAR phases that are completed after 2005. And then finally, the last category of revenue is local receipts, and that includes motor vehicle excise tax, which accounts for about 50%. The rest is a collection of various fines and fees and other revenue sources. We're estimating this will increase about $358,000 for the new fiscal year, or about 4.3%. So if we pull all this together, you'll see the four categories together. We're looking at total revenue of about $117.8 million. Then if we move on to the expenditure side, we're looking at the forecast is based on assuming a step increase for eligible personnel and a 2% cost of living allowance in the salary schedules from fiscal year 16 out to 20. Most expenses are estimated to increase about 2% unless otherwise noted. For the Chelmsford Public Schools, the projections in the forecast are based on the most recent 5-year forecast. And the Neshoba assessment is estimated at 5% in the forecast. However, we really need to see the new student population count that will likely be released in the weeks ahead that are always based on the student counts as of October 1st. Looking at debt service, we know from past meetings, debt service is broken down into 3 categories: excluded debt, non-excluded debt, and betterment-funded debt. And we'll look at these in a little more detail. I'm going to go advance to the column chart so you can see it graphically, but excluded debt is shown in red. And as I mentioned earlier, excluded debt in this current fiscal year that we're in declined about $89,000. It will decline about $389,000 next year, and it continues down about $80,000 a year for the next 3 years. And you can see on the graph it declines over time. Non-excluded debt is shown in blue, That's about 7.09 million this fiscal year. I see that remaining in a range between 7.1 to 7.3 million over the next, over the next 3 fiscal years. What you do see on the graph, if you're looking, is that in fiscal year 19, our non-excluded debt takes a steep decline in fiscal year 19, about 750,000. The reason for that is we'll finally retire the bonds for Center School and the Adams Library. Betterment funded debt that we talked about earlier is shown in yellow, and you can see that's pretty much the level of that will remain about 2.4 million well into the future. Looking at employee benefits, in the forecast, we're estimating the increase for our Middlesex retirement assessment is about 5%. At this point, Middlesex is required by law to have an actuarial valuation performed every 2 years, and that's currently being worked on. Once that's released, we'll know more about this in December. That's going to help determine what our assessment will be for fiscal year 16 and 17. Also in the forecast, health insurance estimate is estimated to increase 5%. We'll know a little bit more about that in the months ahead as well. So if we pull all of the expenditures together from the various categories that you see here on the screen, total expenditures are about 118.4 million. And then you have the forecast, so I won't go through all of this in long detail, but I'll go to the summary screen because it's a lot easier for you to read from where you're sitting. And you see that at this point, for fiscal year 16, I'm projecting a budget deficit of 524,000, which is about 0.4% of budget, so just under 0.5%. For the next years ahead, the budget deficit ranges anywhere from 1.3 up to as much as 1.6%. It's important when we look at this to realize that this is just really a first look at the budget, and we've identified a few uncertain budget factors, and all of these are larger ticket items, and they do have an impact on the budget. And we'll know more about these in the months ahead. On the revenue side, state aid, I mentioned that earlier, that's uncertain at this point. In the expense area, three things: Neshoba assessment, which we talked about, Middlesex retirement, and then a health insurance premiums. So as the months unfold in the budget process, we'll work to refine this. So just wanted to make you aware of those items. Just wanted to take a moment to talk about reserves. When you're reading through the forecast, it's important to note that none of the budget projections that you have in front of you rely on any planned use of reserves from the stabilization fund. Our financial plan includes using reserves in the future years to maintain our stabilization fund at a healthy balance and dedicate reserves towards extraordinary capital when available. The town ended fiscal year 14 with 2.58 million in free cash. The amount of free cash varies each year, as you know. Much of this for fiscal year 14 was driven by non-recurring or one-time revenue sources, namely bond premiums and FEMA storm reimbursement. This is a free cash history going back to 2004. Since you have that in the handout, I won't go through that. And then just to take a quick look at stabilization, this chart shows a history of the general stabilization fund since 2005 and the updated plan going forward. You can see here that there were no withdrawals from the fund in fiscal year 14, and we had investment earnings of about 247,000. So this allowed us to close the fiscal year on June 30th with a stabilization balance of 7.26 million, and that equals about 6.5% of budgeted operating revenues. This puts us above the 5% minimum that's required by our financial policies, but we're still below the level we were back in fiscal year 12, and our long-term goal will be to try to increase this balance back towards 7.5% of the midpoint of the 5 to 10% range. This is just to show you with a graph the stabilization balance charted out as a percentage of total operating revenue. The current fiscal year is shown in red, just to give you some perspective. And you can see that we've definitely made progress since the recessionary days of 2008 and 2009. But we definitely need to continue directing free cash when available into this fund to try to bring it back to 7.5%. I'd point out, back in January 2014, this is one of the key factors that Standard & Poor's looked at when they upgraded the town's bond rating to AA+, which is just one notch below the highest rating of AAA. And by maintaining stabilization, it'll help us keep our bond rating, it'll reduce long-term borrowing costs, and it'll also give us the financial flexibility so that we can respond to either unforeseen emergencies or opportunities that arise. And then lastly, this shows the OPEB trust funding plan to continue addressing our OPEB liability. The town's OPEB assets have now been invested in the Commonwealth's Pension Reserves Investment Trust for just under 2 years since town meeting first authorized it, beginning in January 2013. I'm pleased to report that the town earned about $320,000 during the last fiscal year, much as a result of Pritt's investments, and as we all know, the financial markets had a great year ending in fiscal year 14. So that allowed us to close the fiscal year with about $2.66 million in the OPEB trust, and the plan going forward calls for us to contribute about $1 million annually to the trust fund. It's important to note that the $1 million represents about 43% of the amount that we need to contribute if we're to fully fund this over a 30-year schedule. And from the chart, you can see that it's definitely a positive for us to be, investing and growing these contributions into $23 million over the next 10 years. Just to put it in perspective, we don't want to lose sight of the fact that our liability continues to grow for all the years that we don't fully fund it. So this just shows the liabilities shown in red, the trust fund assets are shown in green. So anything we can do to continue that will also help the town retain its AA+ bond rating, because any credit rating agency will tell you that's something that they want to see every city and town develop some kind of a credible plan to fund as much as you can on that. So that completes the 5-year financial forecast.
Mr. Moderator, I have a question. Claire Janot, Precinct 7. John, thank you for your presentation on the 5-year forecast. Can you just clarify for the record how much of the OPEB funding plan is included in the budgeted deficit for each of the 5 years?
If you look in the benefits and insurance area, the contribution is shown at $1 million. So if you look in that area, it's consistent through all 5 years.
Thank you. Donna Parley, Precinct 7. Mr. Moderator, I'd like to ask Mr. Finance some questions.
Sure.
Well, I'm not supposed to name his name.
Go ahead,
All right.
Mrs.
I
Parley.
see that we are replacing some old engines and dump trucks and sanders. I know they go to auction, but is there a minimum on some of these vehicles for bidding?
The way the process would work is the department head would have to declare those vehicles surplus. So, for example, if they couldn't be used or recycled in some way, they'd have to declare them surplus, and then there would then be a public auction.
Okay, I mean, like buying a dump truck for $30, that's what I'm concerned about. Would there be a minimum required?
I don't recall that we've ever set a minimum bid on some of the things. That you could do that. I mean, it can certainly be done. I know the department heads work to try to get the best value for the salvageable equipment if there is.
Okay. The Engine 1 ladder truck, stupid question. Will it fit in the new fire department?
Yes, it will.
Okay, good. Now, the Evans Engine 7, are other towns allowed to bid at auction for this vehicle?
It's a public auction, so they can also under 30B you can have intermunicipal agreements or transfers.
Okay.
To the best of my knowledge.
Do we have a life expectancy on engine 1?
I would ask if our fire chief could answer that.
I'm sorry.
The answer is, we buy an engine that would last typically 25 years. Depending on how well the truck holds up, we hope to get 25 years out of each engine. Sometimes it's a little less, like engine 1, which is the combination engine and ladder truck.
So, a question about the minimum bid. Who would I ask? Would it be the fire chief, or, I don't even know what his title is, Gary Persichetti?
Yeah, I mean, usually the surplus auction is handled through the town manager's office. So at that time, once the department head declares the item surplus,
Okay.
Someone in the town manager's office would have a list of those items, and they would be able to inform you if there's a minimum bid on any of the items.
Just trying to make more money for the town.
Karen Kowalski, Precinct 1. I just want to clarify something. I see the the 5-year forecast is a negative balance. We don't have a balanced budget for 5 years.
Looking back, a lot of times when I present these, we tend to be conservative in the revenue forecast because we don't want to overestimate and then find ourselves in a problem. A lot of times when I've presented these in the past, they usually have negative balances. I believe last year, I don't have last year's in front of me, but I know the projected deficit for 15 at that time was, I believe, in the neighborhood of 600,000 to 700,000. So this year, for fiscal year 16, it's actually down slightly. The main reason for that is those 3 or 4 items that I listed on the uncertain factors, those can have a huge swing. For example, if we spend about $10 million a year roughly on health insurance, so for every 1% change in that, you can see the kind of money you're talking. So that has a huge impact. Our pension assessment is a very large ticket item. So when we're developing the forecast, these unknowns can sometimes they break our way, and unfortunately sometimes they don't, but we'll work to refine the budget as we go ahead. But this is just to give everyone a snapshot of where we are today and what to expect.
So this is acceptable?
By law, we have to have a balanced budget, so we will work as these items come to light, that we will work to balance it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Moderator, good evening. Bill Griffin, Precinct 9. Through you to the previous speaker. Just a couple of questions about the fund overall. Mr. Souza, is there ever an intention to cap the stabilization fund? We're projecting in 2020 to be up into double digits in the millions of dollars for stabilization. It's quite a substantial amount, and I can't ever recollect having very large sums of money withdrawn from that fund. I understand that the bond rating is key, but are there plans to cap that?
The reason that it goes up over time is really it's the growth of the budget. So we have to look at it as what we don't want to do is fall into a trap today of putting a set number on the stabilization fund, and then as the budget goes up over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll find ourselves into a trap where if we stick with the same dollar amount, $1 5 years from now won't buy us what it will in today or whatever. So we just have to be cautious. I would say I'd be reluctant to put a dollar cap on it. Certainly we don't want it to get to an unrealistic level, but you would want to have adequate reserves so that if we have for unforeseen emergencies or whatever, that it's a meaningful amount.
So I guess maybe there'd be some consideration being towards the bottom end given our outlays over history. Second question is, has there been any consideration given to what constitutes an emergency in terms of the stabilization fund or the rainy day fund, right? We talk about spending this often. Touching on the theme of public safety, we did have the truck out of service. We were at this last session, and there was a desire to use some of this money for that. The truck had been out of service for a long time. We were depending on outside entities for that coverage, and yet we chose not to spend that money. Is there any criteria developed for using this fund? And if not, would you consider it?
It's basically, it would be a town meeting decision. We do have, it does state in the financial policies what the fund is used for. It can be used, town meeting can vote to use it for any lawful purpose. We take a 2/3 vote. But, you know, I mean, our goals would be to use it, again, as we learned, you know, when recessions come along, it always seems, and I'm not trying to be funny, but no one ever seems to raise a flag and say a recession's coming, you know, start trying to ratchet down either spending or looking at cutting programs. It seems to come out of nowhere sometimes. So you just want to always be cautious that you have adequate reserves so that when that unexpected downturn comes, like a 2008, if you go back to where we were in the Great Recession, because of the town financial policies that used to be in place, I think it's fair to say that we kind of, others fell into a trap of starting to use stabilization to supplement operating expenses, a couple million here or $1 million there. And so when we entered the recession, we didn't have adequate reserves. It was down near $2 million, dropped to $1 million at one point. So that would be my word of caution. You always, you know, when we're building it up and times look good, it looks like it may be an excess amount, but you always want to be ready for those downturns.
Can appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Article 1 being done, we'll now proceed to Article 2.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 2 is a article that appears at every fall annual town meeting, and it's sort of, in a way, a bit of a housekeeping procedure, but it is a required procedure under Mass Finance law. And this has to do with the E-rate revenue, of transferring it to the school department. And we're requesting this evening to transfer the amount of funds that we received in the last fiscal year to the E-rate revenue program. In essence, the E-rate, what that is it's a federal program that provides discounted levels of telecommunications and internet support to public schools and public libraries. Our public library does not participate in the E-rate program because they do not wish to restrict their internet access to patrons of the library. However, for obvious reasons, our school department does have a strong firewall and filters. And what we provided for you is the data for the last several years of this fund. As you can see, it's been growing with the activities in the schools. Again, this is a special revenue source, so meaning that the monies that come in from the federal government during the course of the fiscal year are categorized, restricted, and they can be only used for this purpose. So basically, we have to take the procedural vote of appropriating this, in this case, the $56,945 to the E-rate program for the school department to use for this current fiscal year. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Now is the time for question and answers. Does anyone have any questions? Apparently not. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
Finance Committee unanimously recommends.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
Board of Selectmen unanimously recommends approval.
Now is the time for discussion. Does anyone have any comments? There being none, we'll take a vote. Again, 1 is to approve the transfer of funds, 2 is a nay vote, and 3 is an abstention. You'll have 35 seconds from now. The article passes, 133 affirmative, 2 negative, no abstentions. Article 3 is a no action article.
Yes, Mr. Moderator, we placed this article for collective bargaining agreements. At this point, the town has not reached new collective bargaining agreements with either of its 2 police unions, that being the police patrol officers and the police superior officers, or the sergeants union. Their most recent contract agreements expired over a year ago at June 30th, 2013. We hope to reach agreement. We're in a mediation arbitration process right now, and perhaps things may be settled by the spring annual town meeting. So at this point, we request no action under this article.
Thank you. Article 5.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 5 is an action we're taking this evening regarding the Sewer Construction Stabilization Fund. And we're seeking a transfer of $257,697. How that amount derived is it was the actual amount of interest that was earned during the past fiscal year on the sewer capital improvement and betterment accounts. Again, this is sort of similar to the E-rate. This is sort of a housekeeping, but a necessary component of housekeeping for the community. Basically, we're funding our sewer project in three means. One, the initial phases were funded through excluded debt, and then latter phases were funded through betterments and also through the Sewer Capital Improvement Fund. Under Mass General Law, unless otherwise provided by law, all interest earned goes to the general fund. However, the town's financial plan for the sewer construction project, which has debt service that goes out to the end of the next decade, provides that the actual interest earnings on the betterment funds and the sewer capital funds go towards funding that project. So therefore, the process has been at every fall town meeting, we come back and actually take the interest earnings that did occur, and then we vote them mechanically to put them into the sewer construction stabilization process. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Now is the time for question and answers. There being none, does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval.
Do the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
Board of Selectmen unanimously recommends approval.
Any discussion?
Claire Janot, Precinct 7. I'd like to ask the manager, if possible, what percentage of the sewer operating budget the stabilization represents, similar to the way we look at the towns?
The Sewer Construction Stabilization Fund does not pertain to the operating budget of the sewer project. The Sewer Construction Stabilization Fund pertains to the capital debt service, on the debt service on the project. It does not pertain to the enterprise fund at all.
Okay, so how do you evaluate, what sort of policy is there on what the right level is to be in there? I'd just like to understand that, please.
We can have the finance director speak to the methodology here.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, to address the previous speaker's question, as the town manager said, the goal of the Sewer Construction Stabilization Fund, it's not so much as a stabilization fund to be reserves for sewer operations. What it is we have, for all of the sewer construction phases that were completed after 2005, instead of using excluded debt, those were funded with the three revenue sources. Our betterment fund, the cap improvement, and the sewer construction stabilization fund. The sewer construction stabilization fund, it currently has a balance of about $928,000 in it. This is a vehicle that allows us to keep taking all of the interest that we earn each year on the betterments and the cap improvement funds and set them aside and put this in the special purpose stabilization fund. The reason being that we need these dollars down the road. We have debt service payments that are due from now out through fiscal year 31. If we don't do this, we'll lose this interest, and we'd have no choice. But at the end of this timeline, we'd come up about $4 million or more short, and we'd have to that $1.05 that all of us pay on the sewer utility bill would have to remain in effect longer, or it may have to be increased if we don't do this. So this is a way of protecting the interest dollars that we're earning and setting it aside to pay future debt service for the sewer project.
Thank you very much.
Okay, there being no further discussion, this requires a 2/3 vote. If you'll please vote. Now? The article passes, unanimous vote, 137 in favor, no opposition. We'll now move on to Article 10.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 10 pertains to an appropriation that's required for a project to be undertaken by the Board of Assessors to do a townwide property reinspection, and I'll ask our Chief Assessor, Frank Green, to come up and present on this article.
Thank you very much, Paul. This article seeks to help us maintain current and accurate data and inventory, a critical element in developing the uniform market values. Each property will be inspected by fiscal 17, which will coincide with the property recertification by the Department of Revenue. Following which, the property will be inspected once every 9 years. What's involved in a cyclical inspection is simply measuring the exterior of the property, noting some of the materials used, and confirming some of the outside materials in terms of the style of the home. Note and list the other exterior features. Attempt an interior inspection or set an appointment at a convenient time. Also, a digital photo of the exterior of the property only. The data will be data entered on our appraisal software following that. Included in the services by the winning contractor will be measuring, listing all residential and commercial properties, mailing of letters for properties that were not inspected during the first attempt, scheduling of appointments for a second attempt, and once again, a digital image of the property inspected. And then the information would also be data entered into the system. In terms of public notice, alerting folks of who'd be, where we'd be, when we'll be there. In this December's billing, we would put a stuffer, which is just an informational, roughly the size of a dollar slip, alerting folks that we would be out while we'll be conducting the inspections. Following that, we'll send out notifications, mailing them to target areas that we would be hitting over the next couple of months, alerting once again people that we would be coming. They would be listed on the Town of Chelmsford website, as well as Chelmsford Telemedia, and any of the listing personnel would have identification with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reen. Now is the time for questions and answers.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Chris Bowman, 4th Precinct. My question is basically, why is this being done? There's the Registry of Deeds, which records real estate, which property taxes are attached to. It's real estate property, not personal property, not personal inspections of the inside of, of somebody's home. What is going on here?
Following the fiscal 14 revaluation, following every valuation, our directives handed out by the Department of Revenue. Among those directives was a complete measure and list to have it done by fiscal 17. That is to say, to come in, measure the exterior of the home, if possible, get the interior information, take a picture of the home, and note that information and put it into the appraisal software. The intent of it is to have accurate data. It's an integral part of having a proper assessment.
For who? Accurate data for who? It's going to go on a state database.
No, it's going to go on a municipal database. My Canvas system, my appraisal software that's utilized for generating the assessments and ultimately the tax bills.
I still don't see any reason for doing this.
There
is a current system in place, is there not, for real estate taxes?
Yes, but this is a quality control to make sure that the information, and it's a mandate handed down by the Department of Revenue to make sure that we enter the home if possible on a 9 years.
Excuse me, Mr. Reen, has anybody at the state level verified that this state action is constitutionally valid?
It's not only constitutionally valid, it's required.
Wait a minute.
Now, please, this is not time for argument. If you have questions.
I'm not trying to argue with him. I'm trying to ascertain whether or not our basic civil rights, which is listed in the Constitution with respect to land and personal property and personal information in our papers, has properly been verified by the town regarding this state action?
And that question has been answered. The proponent has indicated that this inspection is mandated by the Massachusetts Department of Revenue.
That does not mean that the state has done a constitutional assessment and analysis, and on the face of it, it is not consistent with the Fourth Amendment, which has to do with search and seizure
I would
and warrants.
defer to town council on this matter.
Mr. Moderator, through you to the previous speaker, this is a state law. The state law is presumed to be constitutional unless it is challenged and a court declares it unconstitutional. I would say that the inspection of private property for tax assessment purposes is a longstanding common process in Massachusetts, and to my knowledge, it has never been determined to be unconstitutional.
And that is for real estate property taxes, not personal property taxes, which is coming into the home, inspecting personal property.
No.
May
This
I,
doesn't involve personal property.
May I, Mr. Moderator?
Yes, go ahead.
The basis for property assessment is the valuation of the home. The value of the home is determined not only by the exterior features of the house, but interior features as well. So if there have been improvements made to the interior of the house, that affects the valuation, and the only way for the assessor to know that is to be able to inspect the property, and that's why the state law exists as it does.
And if I understand it correctly, the reason why a home is part of the original real estate land assessment is because a builder builds it, a person purchases it in total, not separate. Then what the state does, they have no right to come into the home without a warrant.
Now you're arguing, okay? You don't have a question. So you can save that for debate if you choose, but this is question and answer time.
Okay, I can ask it as a question.
Well, I think you already have.
Okay. So you're saying sit down, please?
No, I'm saying if you have another question, we'll be glad to listen to it, but if you're going to ask about the constitutionality of the statute, that has been asked and answered.
Okay, then can I ask if the town can do an independent constitutional assessment on this state action, which I truly believe is invalid?
Again, you cannot express your opinion in question and answer. So if you have another question, again, it seems to me as though you're asking the same question over again and just changing the wording a little bit. And again, you keep bringing constitutional issues up. Council has already indicated that there has been no successful constitutional challenge to this particular statute. Perhaps you may want to issue a constitutional challenge to this, but right now we're obligated to follow the law, and town meeting will decide whether or not we do that.
I understand that. I also understand that town officials also have an obligation to support and defend the Constitution.
And again, you're arguing with me,
No,
all right?
I'm not
So-
attempting to argue with you, sir.
Well, you're then not being very successful in your attempts. So please,
I'm trying.
so please, with all due respect,
Okay.
There are other people who have questions, and you certainly will have an opportunity to debate this. But right now,
Okay. I will reserve my further questions later.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Karen Kowalski, Precinct 1. Who's going to be coming in our homes?
It would be a private contractor.
And how do we know that they're really good people?
This is what they do for a living. This is they're listers. They'll come out in
Who
groups of-
selects them?
It'll be an RFP process. It'll be put out to bid.
Would they be bonded,
Yes.
trustworthy, and?
Yes. The typical RFP process with the individual bonding and everything, yes. Yep.
Do we have any more questions?
I'd like to ask my question, but I can't hear myself think. Sorry.
Okay. Please, again, with all due respect, please, if you do have something to say to someone else at your table, please leave the room so that other people can hear the questions and the answers. Thank you.
Elaine McDonald, Precinct 1. As the previous speaker, previous person up at the mic, I also have concerns about people coming to the house. Who's going to be coming? Can they be scheduled so that I can have, like, my husbands and my strong boys all there?
Yes, absolutely. Somebody would have, like I said, I'd be sending out letters. You'd be aware that they'd be in the vicinity in a certain time frame. If you're more comfortable setting up an appointment for early evening or something when somebody else is there, you can certainly do that.
So appointments can be set?
Absolutely, they would be
Right.
set. Yep.
Because my street seems to get so many people knocking on the doors. It's very, very distressing because every time.
Feel free to call my office when somebody comes. They produce their credentials. Feel free to call me.
I think I speak for all the short, tiny women. I speak for many tiny women. I speak for myself. I'm really uncomfortable with folks coming to the door. I really am, and that's just a statement I want on record. Okay.
Jerry Lowe, Precinct 9. From my reading of this, it just looks to me like that the law says that some kind of assessment has to be done, but it's not clear on that we have to let people into our homes. I don't think that I'm asking, is that part of the law? And if not, then people can refuse to have people come to the inside as part of the assessment.
Yes. If you don't, you clearly don't want anybody in your home under any circumstances. You're well within your rights not to allow them in.
Okay. So that clarifies that issue.
In the event that happens, and there's an assessment that you feel aggrieved, and you file an application for abatement, I will then reach out to you and ask that you allow me to come in and see the property.
Sure.
Failing that, if you feel you still don't want me or anybody else in, then the application could be denied.
I don't know if you're short enough to come into my house.
Dennis Sheehan, Precinct 4. I have a question. What happens if we don't approve this?
Then by fiscal 17, if this hasn't been satisfied to the DOR's standards, then we won't get a tax rate for that fiscal year. We won't get approved, the valuations won't be approved, and ultimately the tax rate.
Okay, so basically, if we don't do some sort of inspection, whether we're going inside the house or not, then our tax rates will not be certified.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Sue Dandorop, Precinct 9. I have a question on the $355,000. Is this going to be a recurring expense?
That amount won't be. Following this satisfactory conclusion of this, we'll continue to do 1/9 every year. So it would be substantially less. We'll do some of that in-house and contract some out so that 9 years from now, and the law ultimately reads that we see every property once every 9 years, we will continue to comply.
So over the next 9 years after this, it'll be 1/9 of this total,
Roughly, yes.
approximately. And how does that affect? I'm looking at the budget and the assessor's office. I thought I read here, approximately 271,000, 282,000. Is that going to be an additional 1/9 on top of that, or will there be any reductions in the assessor's budget here?
There'll be reductions. It'll be 1/9 of that figure, roughly some $40,000 a year probably to do it. We'll do much of it in-house.
Well, I guess my question, I'll restate it. The assessor's budget, as it stands today in the 5-year plan, is $271,000 for fiscal year 16.
Right.
Will we see any reduction in that to account for this additional work?
You won't see any reduction in that. The funding for the initial phase of this is to be by releasing the overlay funds, roughly $355,000. That's funding for this. That'll take us through to 17. My budget, which is what I think you're talking about, will remain relatively stable.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Beth Logan, Precinct 3. About what % of the properties do you actually do a
detailed reassessment of each year. Oh, should I be asking you? And of those, what percent do you find are incorrect due to misinformation?
We follow up, we enter people's homes or attempt to inspect the property following applications for abatement, as I just mentioned, or permit work. Obviously, with permit work, we're talking about an addition, so you're likely to see changes there. We find the data to be very good overall, but we do see some percentage changes. I would say maybe 15%, with some relatively subtle differences. Some more, where somebody's put in a finished basement unbeknownst to us.
Glenn Thorne, Precinct 8. Mr. Moderator, through you to the previous speaker. You said that assessments are done every 9 years, the requirement's within 9 years?
No, what I mean by that is every 9 years, the DOR wants to see that we've inspected the home each and every 9 years. They don't want to see a date on my field card or my database showing that nobody's been in the home 10 or 12 years.
So if an assessment was done within 9 years of 2017, will it have to be done again?
Could you say it again? I'm sorry, I didn't
If the
hear.
assessment was done within 9 years of 2017, will they have to do it again?
If somebody was recently inspected, they may very well not have to have the property inspected again.
I asked because my house was assessed last year or this year.
Right.
I wanted to know if I had to do it again. Thank you.
There being no further questions, does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
Board of Selectmen unanimously recommends approval.
Now is the time for discussion. There being, be my guest.
Chris Bowman, 4th Precinct. So if you could clarify, when people buy things for their homes, there is no personal property tax, but there is a sales tax. So when they purchase something and it requires some contractor to come in and install, they pay for the service, they pay for the materials, they pay the state in a state tax for that item. So that is personal property.
And none of that is involved in any of this. What this involved is descriptive real estate. Improved properties, descriptive real estate. This does not involve
So what
personal
is,
property.
if you can enlighten me, what does that mean exactly?
Your home. It doesn't involve the contents of your home, but rather they'll come in and inspect the interior. They'll note how many bathrooms do you have, how many bedrooms do you have, how many rooms total, the quality of the construction, on the interior, the exterior, the materials used, and the size of the home, ultimately trying to derive the finished living area. This doesn't involve any of your personal property items at all.
So, if I'm not mistaken, this is something that is covered within the real estate industry, is it not? As far as the free market system?
I'm not
When
following.
somebody buys a home, sells the home, rents the home,
Yes.
whatever, certain prices are set.
Yes.
And typically, the property taxes are not property taxes, they are real estate taxes, which means land.
Yes. Land and
So
building.
what, it still does not make any sense to me, and I really do not like the idea of the state saying, you shall have somebody come in and inspect your home so that we can raise your taxes to the appropriate level that we deem fit. That's what it sounds like.
That's not the intent of it. This is not the intent of this isn't a revenue generating function. We could very well come in and see properties that we're going to be bringing the value down because we were picking it up for certain items that they no longer have, or it has deferred maintenance. This is a quality control, just to make sure that the data we have on all the properties is true and accurate. This doesn't, once again, this does not involve personal property, just simply room count in terms of the interior and overall view of the interior of the property.
Well, I understand what you're saying and why you're saying it. I emphatically disagree with the state and its nonsense in putting it forth because it is revenue generating. and that would be the only reason for the state to do it. I thank you for your time. I thank you for answering my questions. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you.
Jeff Hardy, Precinct 6. This is a practice that has been done to commercial property for many years. It's not invasive, it's not painful. Many times it becomes a benefit to the property owner because the assessment may have been too high. So I don't see any problem. This is just getting everybody in the same pool once again.
How are you? Ken Tassi, Precinct 2. I just have a quick question. Sure. If you're a landlord, are you getting the letter, or is it going to your tenants?
It's going to go to the owner of record.
Okay, thank you.
Sam Chase, Precinct 1, also Chairman of the Board of Assessors. Mr. Moderator, through you to the Speaker, I'd like to ask, I should know, but I don't, how many abatements did the Board of Assessors grant last year?
The percentage, we probably grant 50 or 60 of those that apply. We have roughly 150 to 200 that file each and every year. I'd say we grant a good 60%, and sometimes relatively smaller, sometimes larger.
So the Board of Assessors actually granted abatements, which means that the assessed value of the property was too high,
That would be correct.
and the abatement resulted in a reduction of property taxes. That's correct?
That would be correct.
And approximately how many of those abatements were followed up by inspections by your office?
We almost always, 80 to 90%, if not 100%, we go out and visit the property to confirm, particularly for their application and their contention relates to data. We obviously would follow that up with a physical inspection of the property.
So as a result of the inspection, and in this case, people voluntarily letting representatives of your office into the home resulted in a tax reduction to that property owner, is that correct?
That would be correct.
All right. So based on that, there is every reason to believe that what the previous town meeting representative said could in fact happen. These inspections could actually result in lower property values and a reduction in the amount of real estate tax that people pay.
That would be correct.
It can go either way.
It could go either way.
Okay, I'd just like to make one final point, speaking as an assessor. A town meeting representative, previous town meeting representative, was concerned about the assessor coming into the house and looking at things, I think, in terms of personal property. I think you made it very clear that that's not part of the inspection. I'd like to just clarify relative to proper assessing and appraisal techniques, that once you put a building on a piece of land, it becomes part of the real estate. It's valued as a whole. Building is attached to the land, it's part of the real estate. Further, a piece of personal property that is attached to the home becomes part of the real estate and therefore part of its value. The second part I would like to clarify is that the methodology used for determining residential property values is not just sales. The method used is the cost method. State law, and as far as I know, the state law in all 50 states requires that two methods be used when you determine property values for residential purposes. You must use the cost method, which estimates the cost of reconstructing the building, if new, less depreciation, and you also must use sales values to determine the market. So two methods are used, not just sales. Thank you.
Thank you.
Laurie Myers, Precinct 6. These are in-state contractors, do we know? In-state contractors that would be coming in?
Yeah, they're in-state real estate professional firms that conduct in mass appraisals.
Okay, and they've all had Corey background checks?
Yes.
Thank you.
Dennis Shan, Precinct 4. Regarding abatements, can you give us a little more information regarding the numbers of commercial versus residential and perhaps the amount of commercial reductions versus residential reductions? Any feel for that?
Last year or two, we've probably had, on a percentage basis, probably slightly more on the commercial side in terms of applications that have been applied, that have been filed. In terms of abatements granted, I'd say they follow very similar as the residential. They're roughly 50 to 60%, probably less the more I think about it. I've never broke it out by percentages, just going off the cuff. Probably
How about
somewhat less than the
dollar-wise on the amount of abatements, commercial, excuse me, commercial versus residential?
Given the values that are associated with the commercial industrial, particularly here in Chelmsford, which is a pretty sophisticated commercial industrial base, probably somewhat more on the commercial side, once again, given the kind of values.
So typically the
but not as
abatements,
much as you'd-
there's bigger money in abatements on the commercial side than on the residential side.
Certainly, for most parcels.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, Bill Griffin, Precinct 9. Just a quick follow-up to Mr. Reno, if I could. Can understand the sensitivity, people, folks getting into their homes in these days and age, big concern. In terms of, personal injury to the assessors and things coming in, what kind of protections do the homeowners have in that regard, and what does the town have in place to ensure that no kinds of recording devices are with those folks when they're moving through your place of residence?
There'll be no recording devices. The only thing they'll have is a camera. There'll be no interior pictures, only an exterior, generally of the front and the rear, and any other points of interest if there's a new addition or that sort of thing.
So nothing other than a camera.
That's correct.
Having, in this day and age of information and the ability to do that kind of stuff, what kind of checks is the town going to be working on to make sure that these people are not taking personal information out of the insides of these residences?
These firms do this. This is what all they do is mass appraisal. They hire experienced people. They'll all be bonded.
So again, do we have any other protections other than what their statements of their bona fides are?
None that I could think of. I can certainly appeal to the providing the bidder.
So maybe it might be worth trying to look that over before this gets started. And as far as the liability for an assessor being in the home and claiming injury?
Mm-hmm. They'll all be bonded and insured. It's like any other contractor.
Okay, thank you.
Peggy Dunn, Precinct 1. Mr. Moderator, I'd like to move the question.
Ms. Dunn, if you withdraw it, there are no other people, and we won't have to vote on that, if you don't mind. There's no one behind you, so there's really no need to move the question. So why don't we just vote on the article? All right?
Whatever you say.
Thank you. There being no further discussion, this requires a simple majority vote. Please vote now.
Yeah, the debate on this article, Article 10, took an interesting turn into the possible security implications of having people inside their home. And while that's understandable, I think in our everyday lives, we allow many people in the home to install dishwashers, deliver furniture, and so forth. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be cautious, but this is a situation where the contractors will be vetted and approved by not only the state,
The
but
article
also
passes
the town.
117 in favor, 20 opposed, 1 abstention. Go to Article number 11, which is a citizen's petition. So, Mr. Lowe. And if you can please not talk so loudly, we can hear you up here, and I know that there were some representatives who were having a hard time hearing some of the presentations earlier, so thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jerry Lowe from Precinct 9, and I put in this warrant based on feedback from my constituents in Precinct 9 and other folks in other precincts that had issues in the previous years with decisions made by the ZBA that they felt that they didn't have really fair representation. And I also agree with that. So that's the reason why I put it together. Before you even vote on this, I would just like to make it very clear that even if this passes tonight, it's not final. It has to go to a town vote, a complete town-wide vote, because it's a charter change. Okay, so I want you to keep that in mind. So your vote tonight, if it does pass, still is not final. So I did some research on this before I put this together, and after I put it together, I went before the Finance Committee, and they had some great questions. Massachusetts, all I could find in Massachusetts is 4 towns with elected zoning board of appeals. However, there's other states that have several towns. Connecticut has many towns that have an elected zoning board of appeals. New Hampshire has many towns that have zoning board of appeals that are elected. So it's not an unknown, it's not a new thing. Part of this, I think, came out of when towns went to charters, when they went to a representative form of government instead of town meeting of the people, the states drew up templates for town charters that people could take and adapt to do when they did their study on a charter, on the charter and what that would look like and how they would change it. And I think in a lot of, I'm guessing, I don't know the true history, but I would guess that some templates probably included an appointed zoning board of appeals, and that just happened to be something that wasn't challenged, and that's maybe why it's very prevalent in Massachusetts and maybe not prevalent in other states that went to charter forms of government. So that's just I haven't done the total research on that. I would have liked to, but I haven't. So I did talk to a few towns where they have elected zoning board of appeals. I talked to the chair of the zoning board of appeals in Sturbridge, Massachusetts, who's been on the ZBA for 8 years. And I asked him, why did you do it? What are the implications? And his main concern, or the town, what he felt the town's main concern, and they changed their charter to this same way, is that they wanted to make sure that there was not special interest on that very important board. They felt that that's one of the most important boards in the town and makes very key decisions about development, because they have to do appeals, and that many of the projects are not standard and have to be appealed. So that was his major reason. And then the other thing that he addressed to me, which became a question that Finance Committee gave me, is that don't you want experts on that board that really understand the zoning laws? And to that he said, he knew absolutely nothing when he came into the Zoning Board of Appeals. He just read all the bylaws. It's not much different to me and to him what town reps do when they come into this position as a town rep. They don't understand a lot of the issues of the bylaws. They have to read the bylaws to be an educated town meeting rep and ask questions on those. I've read all the bylaws. Some of them I don't understand, but I'll ask questions when I don't, but I have read them. I feel that you need to do that to be a representative of your town. And he said that that was no problem, and that, the town has been very happy with this form of elected zoning board of appeals, because he feels it's fairer and it helps the town develop the way that the town wants to develop, and not a few as opposed to the many. So that's basically my reason. And do I stay up here for questions, or?
Yes, if
Okay.
people have questions for you, certainly.
Thank you.
Now is the time for question and answer, so if anyone has any questions of the proponent.
Glenn Thorne, Precinct 5. You said there were 4 towns or cities that were electing their ZBA members. What are they? Sturbridge is one. What were the other?
Taunton is another. I forget what the other two are, or I don't remember what the other two. Those were the 2 that I talked to. So
The other one was Groton, did you say?
is it Groton? I don't know. I didn't say about what And
I didn't hear you, that's why.
Taunton is the second
Taunton,
one.
okay.
Yes, Taunton.
And did you speak to them about why they elected their zoning board of appeals members?
In Taunton?
Yes.
No, I didn't get a hold of Taunton.
How many cities and towns are there in the Commonwealth, of which this 4 is a fraction?
I don't know.
351, does that sound about right?
Yeah, you know, you're giving me math, and I tried to explain why I think that might have. That doesn't, to me, that's not a reason. That's just the way things happen. And again,
Mr. Lowe,
yeah.
with all due respect, you're arguing, he asked you if the number 351 was a number that...
I don't know. I have no
that's the
idea
answer.
what the town.
So of the 347 cities and towns that don't elect their zoning board of appeals, how many of those did you call to find out why they don't?
I didn't, but I would.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for the proponent? There being none, does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
Finance Committee unanimously recommends against this article.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
Board of Selectmen voted 3-2 against recommending this article.
Now's the time for discussion. Are there any parties who wish to discuss this?
Mr. Moderator, Sam Chase, Precinct 1. I'd like to poll the Board of Selectmen specifically. I'd like to ask each member why they voted the way they did, given the fact that there was a split vote. Thank you.
I voted not to recommend approval of this article. I think the ZBA functions well in its current composition. I think it does maintain independence with appointments by the town manager. We're able to have a diverse membership on that board, which I think serves the town well.
It's not going to be very good, is it? I voted in support of the article, and the reason I did, among one of the reasons, is that during the hearings of a 40B that's located close to me, people on the Board of Appeals refused to provide telephone numbers and email addresses so that people could send them email. And as a result of that, people had to send the email to the town manager, and then the town manager had to send it or print it or whatever. And I think there are special interests. I don't know how many developers are on there. We have an attorney that represents 40B clients in how to get these 40Bs approved. And I don't think the mix is that representative of the town. And that's why I voted the way I voted.
I voted in favor of the article. I spoke to a lot of residents, and I myself support the article, as well as almost all of the residents I spoke with, either myself reaching out to them or people calling and emailing me, they were in support of this article. I believe, you know, while I'm not against the current Zoning Board of Appeals members, I think they do a great job. I think it's a very tough job. I do believe that the residents would be more accepting of their decisions if they felt like they were more involved in the process, which includes the voting of these members. So it's the basis of my decision.
Okay. I voted against this article. I do think the current Zoning Board of Appeals, it has a mix of people. I think they're doing a good job. We do have a lot of elected positions, including the Board of Selectmen. We hire the town manager, then he appoints the Zoning Board of Appeals. We do have an elected planning board. But ultimately, the current Zoning Board of Appeals hasn't, since I've been around, lost any cases that have been tried in court. I think they have a very specific function, and I think there have been a lot of great picks for the Zoning Board of Appeals currently. I haven't seen any major problems, and no one has reached out to me personally requesting that I ask the town manager to change any of the current appointments. So if there was some will from the community and people were calling me, encouraging, you know, change on the Zoning Board of Appeals, you know, for a specific issue, with the way things are being appointed, then I would maybe consider this, but nobody's really brought that to my attention, so.
Thank you. I voted against the article, and as far as an attorney that's on the board, the chairman, I find him to have as much integrity as anybody I've ever met in the town, so I don't have a problem with that.
Hi, Mr. Moderator, Laura Merrill, District 2. I just wanted to understand why the Finance Committee voted unanimously against this.
The Finance Committee believes that if there was an elected board versus an appointed board, that possibly the elected board could have inexperience, and the inexperience to understand the application of the town zoning bylaws and possibly the general laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And if that was the case, and I do say if, the lack of knowledge could lead to additional legal fees incurred by the town in litigating the disputes. And that's basically the idea for our decision.
Okay, just of everyone that is elected to the Finance Board, would you have, or appointed to the Finance Board, what is the is there a qualification that you have to be experienced enough, or do you get a lot of the experience when you are appointed?
Well, each of us has their own different special qualifications, and I think that's up to the moderator, because the moderator does do the appointing. And of course, in any situation, Zoning Board of Appeals, Board of Selectmen, School Committee, Finance Committee, and any of the other wonderful boards, there is a lot of learning experience, and that's one of the wonderful things that we choose to do as being a board member.
Thank you. I am fully in support of this article, and I think that based on the issues that we've had for the last few years about questions to the ZBA, I don't think that we should be afraid to be electing our officials instead of having them appointed by a few. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Paul Haverty, Precinct 7, also a appointed member of the Zoning Board of Appeals. I appeared before the Finance Committee and answered some of the questions that have been asked earlier. One of the important things that was raised by the proponent tonight was in terms of the experience level of the different members of the Board of Appeals, and he said that he had spoken to one of the other towns that had an elected board, and he mentioned that that particular chairman stated that they only needed to review the local bylaws, but that's not the only thing that's the subject for the Board of Appeals. The Board of Appeals is required to apply and interpret not only the zoning bylaws of the town of Chelmsford, but also the State Zoning Act, which is Chapter 40A. And answering another question that was asked with regard to how it was set for the different towns to have an appointed Board of Appeals rather than elected, it's right in the statute. The default provision for determining whether the board is elected or appointed is that it would be appointed right out of Chapter 48. I'd like to address the statement that was made earlier with regard to the Mill Road project and members of the Board of Appeals not having their telephone numbers or their email addresses made public. And in fact, multiple members of the Board of Appeals do have their emails public. But as the acting chairman for that particular application, I was dead set against anybody emailing any member of the Board of Appeals outside of the public hearing process. It's very important to understand the Board of Appeals is not a policy-making body. The Board of Appeals actually rules upon applications or appeals that come to it. So there shouldn't, in every single application in front of us is a public hearing with an applicant who has rights. And there shouldn't be conversations between individual board members and members of the public outside of the public hearing. If there are emails going back and forth, those emails are required to be a public record. And if they're happening outside of the process on personal email accounts, that creates a very significant problem for the members of the board. So I was dead set against that happening, and I don't think that that's a good reason at all for saying that the Board of Appeals should be an elected position rather than an appointed position. I think that it would be a very big mistake to make the Board of Appeals an elected position. I think that you will lose members that have been members for a very long time, that have a tremendous, just an incredible amount of institutional knowledge, for having sat on the Board of Appeals for over a decade, and sometimes even more. We also have a very good mix because there are also other members of the board who have been on for less than a year, but have served in multiple other elected and appointed positions throughout the town. And they also bring a tremendous amount of value to the board. And I think almost to a person, they will not run for election. Because if they really wanted to run for election, they'd probably be running for a policy-making board, not at a board that is only there to rule and interpret existing laws. So I would request all of my fellow representatives to please vote against this article. Thank you.
Ryan Latina, Precinct 4. I think the body here ought not to be afraid of electing people. We elect our state representatives, our governor, even our president. And it's frightening to me to think that we should be appointing people like that. I don't care for the concept of appointing czars to different levels that tend to be political. I think the people in this country have a pretty good record of voting people in and voting people out when they need to do so. I spent an inordinate amount of time from July 3rd until very recently trying to pursue what in the world we were doing on Mill Road. And one of the things that bothered me quite a lot was that we had experts on the Zoning Board of Appeals that were on first name basis for a lot of the people that were coming in to come to the board. And that bothered me about as much as actually seeing text messages going on during one of the meetings. So there are outside conflicts that happen that when you have elected people, you can vote them out later. Now, I'm not saying I wouldn't be willing to vote for any number of those people that are on that board when you put them on the ballot as an expert. Someone in the real estate business, that's a great person to have on there. But when you appoint people, you're kind of stuck with someone else's decision, and you don't have control of your section of the town anymore. And that's what I saw happening. The other side of this is when you elect someone, you get them for a short period of time, and you can send them on their way. You're finished. These folks that you have on the ZBA, they are experts. There's no question about it. And some of them actually work in the same business. And that was troubling to me as a resident who was trying to understand and trying to change the minds of putting an edifice of Lowell standards on the corner of Mill Road and not feeling like I got an elected person that I could talk to, an elected person that might change their mind had they known that they would lose that position if they just go ahead and put an apartment complex on that corner. Thank you.
Peggy Dunn, Precinct 1. I'm in favor of the appointment process because I think in that particular position, people who apply to be appointed really have some interest in it. They usually have some expertise in it and are willing to give that expertise and time to that job. I don't think electing people is always like a safe bet against appointing. I think Mr. Lowe said something about a clique or a group or something being in charge of the appointments. That very well can happen with elections. You can have a situation where there is someone who has an agenda and is interested in moving that agenda along that tries to get people elected. So you're not safe from anything that way, but I prefer the appointment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, Bill Griffin, Precinct 9. I won't claim to try to sway anyone in either direction, but just a few notes to ponder with regard to that last process. I too was a participant, a resident in the recent Mill 40B, as well as another one that was very, very close to my property. from Bill Ricca. If all goes according to plan, I'll have close to 800 apartment units within a mile of my house in the next 5 years. We're being legally urbanized. But beyond that, I just want to touch on a couple of points. You've heard a couple of comments from folks this evening, and I do wish to correct a couple of items. At the tri-board meeting, when first news of this was going to break, residents, we did try to come, and I did make it a point to speak to the Board of Selectmen, and I was very much concerned about the process at the time. And if you all recollect very well, I said I was disappointed in the process, and I felt that it was going to become contentious and that the individual residents would have to try to resort to legal representation to have their voices heard. And that was the night of the tri-board meeting. And then after the very first meeting, with the contentiousness that went on there, I came before the Board of the Selectmen and I asked them to keep an eye on the process because it had gotten out of hand. Do you recollect that? So there was a resident coming to you very early on in the process concerned about how things would be going. It is disconcerting to be participating as a resident and trying to have a voice heard in the process, and to understand that you're sitting there competing against text messages or folks coming down to meetings, and you're trying to have your voice heard and you're having to wait. You've been there all night, or you've been there for another meeting and don't get to speak at all. It got to be the point where, honestly, the other folks in the process finished out. I'd had enough. I was disenfranchised. I'm sitting at the front row of a meeting, and people are walking in and they're saying, okay, here comes so-and-so, and they haven't even taken their seat yet. Or folks are walking down the hall and saying, I don't know why you should be doing this. Something's going to happen in there anyway. That's not, to have the temerity to be saying that as part of this process is indicative of something underlying the system. And whichever way you choose to do this, it's going to need to be monitored in the future. Thank you.
Sam Chase, Precinct 1. Mr. Moderator, I have a question to you, and if you can direct that to whoever would answer. I'm looking at the Chelmsford Town Charter, Section 4-2, Powers of Appointment. And it says here that, except as otherwise provided by this charter, the town manager shall appoint based on merit and fitness alone. Based on merit and fitness alone. All department heads, officers, subordinates, employees, and all appointed multiple member bodies for whom no other method of selection is provided for in this charter. So, I guess my question, Mr. Moderator, to you, to anybody who would care to answer it, is does the appointment authority, when he makes these appointments, consider the appointments of members of the Zoning Board of Appeals on merit and fitness alone, or is there some other criteria that is used?
Well, I'm not the appointing authority for the Zoning Board of Appeals, so I'll defer to the individual who is.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As the appointing authority, I basically evaluate the criteria of the candidates that are before me. I've been here 8 years as town manager. I don't recall any instances of any controversy regarding any of my appointments. In essence, those who were on the board when I arrived here, I've kept them on the board. And those who came in, I evaluated them on their merits. Some have come and gone, some have stayed. But I also want to point out to the speaker and to the town meeting body that it's not solely my appointment. I am the appointing authority subject to the confirmation of the Board of Selectmen. And as I mentioned, I've been here 8 years and I've had 15 different members of the Board of Selectmen, and I don't believe there's been a negative vote by any member against any of my appointments to the Board of Appeals.
Following the statement of the previous speaker, wherein you described the appointment and confirmation process by the Board of Selectmen, you said there had been no discussion or objection to your appointments to the Board of Appeals. Have there been any indication from any members of the board over the last 2 or 3 years that your appointments were not sufficient and did not meet the criteria as specified in the town charter?
No, I don't, have no recollection of any such concerns being brought to my attention in terms of the quality of the members of the appointment to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I would also point out to the fact that I'm not aware of any instances, and I know that I personally have never contacted a member of the Board of Appeals regarding how they should act on any particular case. And that's why there was a statement mentioned earlier about that someone went to the Board of Selectmen to try to seek some action on a hearing or process. Basically, the members of the Board of Selectmen and I stay out of that process because it is an adjudicatory hearing process. And in essence, the decisions of the Board of Appeals, if they are to be appealed, go to the courts and so forth. And so the board and I do not interject ourselves or our own opinions into those matters. And so that's why we basically aren't involved in those hearings. So our role pretty much ends at the appointing process. And obviously, we monitor the activities, but we do not inject ourselves in any of the particular cases before the board.
Okay, so in the opinion, Mr. Moderator, in your opinion, or to whoever can answer this question, the Board of Selectmen really has the final authority over the appointed members of the Zoning Board of Appeals or any board that's appointed. Is that correct?
Yeah, again, I have no opinions. I'm the moderator, so.
To anyone who can answer the question.
I think town council can answer the appointment process in Chelmsford. Yeah.
Mr. Moderator, through you to the previous speaker, yes, that's essentially correct. The selectmen have the ultimate authority.
So if the selectmen did not like the town manager's appointees, they could refuse to approve any of them.
You could vote for us, honestly.
Is that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, you did.
All right. And the Board of Selectmen is an elected body, elected by at-large throughout the town. Correct?
That I know.
Everybody gets to...
Everybody knows that.
Everybody gets to vote for the Board of Selectmen.
Yes.
Okay. All right, just a couple more comments. I did a little research into this to see what the thinking was at the time the town decided to draft its charter back in 1989. And just a couple of comments from the report that was written by the Charter Commission at that time before the town voted to adopt the current charter. The Charter Commission, Review Commission said, they talked about a discussion as to whether or not boards should be elected or appointed. And at the time, prior to the charter, I think the majority of boards and many of the paid town official positions, such as the town clerk, for example, were elected positions. Town treasurer was an elected position. This is what the Charter Commission in 1989 had to say on this after very, very lengthy deliberations, public hearings, and so on and so forth. They said, because of the complexity of appointed versus elected officials, no one method was used to arrive at our decisions. So they were in the process and had made a recommendation as to which board should be elected or appointed. They said perhaps the strongest influence on these decisions was determining whether or not a position was a policy-making or an administrative regulatory position. If it were judged to be policy-making, the commission was more apt to make it elective. So by default, if it were not policy-making, it would be more apt to be appointed. And I think that speaks to the comments that a previous town meeting member made relative to appointed versus elected. Finally, I would say that, in my opinion, I can't prove it, it's just my opinion, but according to what was told to us by a previous speaker, the position of appointed ZBA member is the statutory default position. So in other words, unless a town actively decides that they want to have an elected Board of Appeals, by default of statute, you will have an appointed Board of Appeals. So that really is the mechanism and the rationale behind why we have the vast majority of cities and towns have appointed boards of appeals. It's my opinion, for whatever it's worth, that the Zoning Board of Appeals cannot in any way, shape, or form be considered any kind of a political board. They are considering appeals, and I think it's important to remember that the ZBA is not the planning board. They're an appeals board, and they have to follow the standards and the requirements that are laid down by state law and the local zoning ordinances. The other thing that I would ask people to remember is, and I understand people are upset on certain projects and so on and so forth, I understand that, but the Zoning Board of Appeals is obligated to protect all the interests of all the parties that come before the ZBA, not just people who may be for or against a particular variance, or in case of a 40B or 40B project. So we have to remember that the ZBA is legally obligated to protect the interests of the applicant, those parties that have an interest in what's coming before the ZBA, as well, and also the entire community, as well as people who may have a specific and finite interest in a particular matter that's before the board. So I strongly urge this body to defeat this article. I think the town is better served by an appointed Board of Appeals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jerry Lowe, Precinct 9. I'd like to ask the Finance Committee on a unanimous vote about being worried about legal expenses, et cetera, on an elected board. Of the 351 towns in Massachusetts that have appointed boards, of the 4 that don't have them, and several others in other states that have elected boards, did they contact any of them to find out if there were any legal issues or problems with having an elected board?
No, we have not. Do you have that information?
No, I don't have it. But you made a unanimous decision based on your thought that that could be a real problem, but you didn't verify that that could be a real problem.
That's right. It was our thought. It was our thought that came from a conclusion of our discussions. If there's anybody else on the board that would like.
I have another concern. I have a concern that special interest in the town might want to influence the Zoning Board of Appeals. And we talked about that at the meeting.
Okay, so the thing that, of course, this is my warrant, or people in the town's warrant. People that I represent that came to me for this. I have a few issues with things that were said. One of them is that the ZBA, people on the ZBA should not be contacted by email or by phone, and that it should all take place in open public meetings. I don't know if that's mandated by the law, but it sounds like to me, I'm fine. If I write an email to the ZBA, I'm fine with that being public as part of the public record. I would expect it to be. I would not be writing them to them in private. I mean, I would expect that to be part of the situation. When someone says to me they would not run, to be on a board, that they would only take it if they're appointed, that bothers me as well. The fact that they can run and still be elected and still represent the town and do a service to the town is what I feel as a citizen of the town you would want to do either way. But to say, if it's changed, I'm not going to run, I'm not going to help the town, that bothers me. I just don't understand why there's so much contention against letting the town people who have brought this forward, not just me, let the town decide this. These issues can come out in a public, much more public forum than in this group. This group is saying, we know better than everybody else. I mean, we represent them, but at this point, this, I think, is an important enough issue that you would want the townsfolk to be able to weigh in on it. You can educate them, you can put whatever you want out there, and let them decide. I mean, that's what we're here for. We're here to represent those people. We're not here to represent ourselves or our own opinion. That's how I feel about it. And I think that we need to get out in the town and find out what that opinion is more than just doing it in our own vacuum of our own opinion. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Chris Bowman, 4th Precinct. I just want to bring a few points to light that everybody should consider while we're pondering this article. ZBA board members are really very powerful because their decisions can affect and do affect the character of the town. Whether you agree with them or not, whether you think they did a good job or not, the point is, when they do make decisions, those decisions can have a tremendous impact on the infrastructure of the town, demanding a tremendous increase in infrastructure, can have a tremendous drain on town resources, can adversely affect the quality of life in town, and can also tremendously increase the tax rate. So if we elect the ZBA board members, you as a resident and all residents in town have a specific voice that can be exercised at X amount of time, whenever the vote will be, for that board. So if the residents do not like what's going on, they have more readily the power to vote people in or people out. With the current situation, residents do not have that power. It's up to other people to see what's going on. I heard a lot of people also say that with elected people, there are special interests who could sway this or sway that. Well, another thing to keep in mind is that special interest is not a one-way street. It's a two-way street. There will be special interests regardless of who's in or which method is used. I think the pertinent question is, which method gives the residents the most power in determining the shape that this town is taking and will take in the future? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Glenn Thorne, Precinct 5. I believe a few speakers ago, we had some very good background information on why the Zoning Board of Appeals is not an elected body. We understand that 347 cities and towns do not elect the Zoning Board of Appeals because I believe that it's to separate that board from the politics of decisions that they make. We do have a quality control system in place. The quality control system of the 5 selectmen that you see sitting there. The quality control system is the quality of the town manager you see sitting over here. Now, if there's a defect in the 5 selectmen you see sitting there, or the town manager that you see sitting over here because of something the Zoning Board of Appeals has consistently done wrong and looks like they're not up to the job, then we can fix that. We can replace the selectmen, and they can replace the town manager. But from the observations and the comments that the town manager has made, I don't see anything that's broken. I see the Zoning Board of Appeals year in and year out doing the things they have to do without any pushback from the Board of Selectmen that they haven't done their job appropriately. And here we have someone that proposes a change in our charter to fix a problem that doesn't exist. Well, let's have people vote on things. The quality control system is that the town manager is able to balance out the Zoning Board of Appeals with the talent that the town needs to appropriately look at all the issues, from the legal matters, from the financial matters, from the construction matters. The Zoning Board of Appeals is to resolve any appeal based on the law as it stands today. It is a good working system. It's been competent for decades upon decades. It's like 98% of the entire state uses this system and doesn't find a major problem with it. And what I'm hearing a little bit in the background music here is that people don't agree with a specific decision from the Zoning Board of Appeals, so let's get rid of them and vote them in where big money and politics can be part of the decision-making process. So I believe that there is not a broken situation here that requires a charter change, but we have a wonderful group of people that's been selected for balance and competency, endorsed by the Board of Selectmen that is doing their job year in and year out, and we should have them continue to do it. vote this article down, please.
Dennis Shan, Precinct 4. As I understand that if we pass this article tonight, nothing really happens until we give the people of the town the opportunity to decide what they want to do. Typically, I trust the townsfolk to do the right thing, and I would support this article.
Hi, Sue Carter, Precinct 5. I have been in front of many zoning board of appeals in many towns, and seeing it from the applicant's perspective, it's a very legal process. There are a lot of rules that have to be followed. It's very easily appealed if there's a failure to follow the proper procedures, which includes if you find out that ZBA members have been talking to members of the public outside of the public hearing. I have run into ZBA members in other towns, and they wouldn't even talk to me. Oh, no, you're in front of me. I can't talk to you at all. There's no interaction. We've got to keep it all above board. It's a very legal process. Probably very few people in this room know the criteria for granting a variance. It's not whether or not you like the person and whether or not you believe, well, you know, their mother really does want to subdivide that lot for the kids, and they're good people, so we'll vote yes. That's not the criteria for the ZBA. The ZBA is not a popularity contest, and I'm afraid that if it's elected, you'll get people who are very sympathetic to the neighbors. A variance is granted on the basis of the property, soils, topography, shape of the property, and other very specific issues. It's not whether or not you like the person or not, or if you're afraid if you say no to this person, they're not going to re-elect you. I think it needs a checks and balances. Planning board's elected. If you don't like something that the planning board does, you don't elect them again, or it gets appealed to the Board of Appeals. Board of Appeals is more of a judiciary body, not a popularity contest. I urge you to vote no on this petition.
Joanne Anderson, Precinct 6. If somebody had asked me about this article several years ago, I might have been interested in it. However, a few years ago, I came in front of the planning board and asked to be the citizen representative for the zoning bylaw review committee. I know nothing about zoning. I'm a nurse. So in the past couple of years, I've learned a lot about zoning, but I would consider myself about as much of an expert on zoning as me getting on the finance committee because I do the bills in my house. I would say that the town manager obviously looks carefully at who he's choosing to put on the zoning bylaw, the ZBA, and is picking people appropriately. So I would vote for no on this.
Mr. Moderator, just a point of clarification, Bill Griffin, Precinct 9. There was a comment a few moments ago about checks and balances in the system and that things are broken, not broken, et cetera. Just by point of reference, I think I've got about 7 years in on some of the various activities between our own board and some of the outside of town regarding the projects I've mentioned. I don't claim to be an expert, but what I will say is what troubles me and what I tried to say in my first comments was I think those checks and balances are not always working. At the beginning of the process, I provided a priority warning, and during the beginning of the process, I provided the same. And I don't feel that that was heeded very well. So with that in mind, I know I won't sway people one way or the other, but do pause to consider that as you move forward.
Mr. Moderator, Pat Magnell, Precinct 8. I see this question as a sort of a very tough balancing act. Yes, you've got to have expertise, but yes, you've got to have democracy, and that's what I live in, and that's what I expect. I'd rather democracy is messy. I'd rather have more than less. As was previously mentioned, if this passes, it still has to go to the voters, and if they decide they will go onto the side of expertise, then so be it. But generally speaking, I would rather see power concentrated in the hands of the many than of the few, and I enthusiastically support this article.
Fran, are you coming to talk on the microphone? No need, evidently. Okay. Then, if there's no further discussion, Mr. Lowe?
I just have one quick thing I want to bring up. One of the previous speakers said that the board is, you know, policy boards are elected and I guess kind of qualitative control boards are appointed. But I would say that a board whose job it is to make exceptions to policy is just another side of the policy. The policy's made, and then they make exceptions to that policy. I'd say that's pretty intrinsic to something that carries on policy and enforces policy. And I think it's very important that that process is carefully looked at. I have no qualms. I'm not denigrating anybody, any board member or anything at this point. The whole idea behind this is, again, process, due process, electoral process, democratic process. Judges in some states are appointed, and in other states they're elected. You know, it depends on what people feel and what they want. And, you know, a judge is someone that is, I'm bringing that up because they said judges are, you know, more like the ZBA. They decide if something should be an exception or not. And in some states they're elected. Yeah, there'll be politics. There's politics in an elected board as well, but you know, I think it's a much closer system to what we expect or, you know, want is a democracy. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you.
Frances McDougall, Precinct 1. I'd like to move the question.
I'll exercise my prerogative since no one else is standing behind you, and we'll just vote on it. Thank you.
It was almost that way a minute ago.
I'm not going to argue with you. Okay, so this requires a 2/3 vote. A yes vote changes the charter to the extent that there would have to be an election. A no vote will maintain the system as it exists. And please vote now.
This is Kelly Beatty for Chelmsford Telemedia. It was going to be pretty clear from the outset that Article 11, the citizen petition, was going to garner the lion's share of the attention tonight, and that certainly has proved to be the case. It requires a 2/3 affirmative vote, and it is apparently nowhere near that. I see more than 100 votes against, so it didn't even get a majority.
The article fails. The final vote was 32 in favor, 103 opposed, and 4 abstentions. Article 12.
Do you want to take recommendations from the planning board and other boards first?
Well, we haven't had a presentation yet.
Okay.
So if you can tell us what Article 12 is about.
Sure.
Thank you.
Article 12 is a proposed revision to the zoning bylaw section specific to the sign bylaw. In regards to background, if you recall, several years ago, this body adopted a prohibition on LED signage. And again, this is specific to illumination that is used, in this particular case, for LED type signs. At the time, the planning board proposed this measure as a stopgap. They were interested in providing some opportunity for further research. If you recall, several years ago, LED technology was on the forefront, and it was quickly becoming the new standard for lighting technology. During this past summer of 2014, the planning board appointed a technical subcommittee of several planning board members, including George Zaharoulis, Mike Raisbeck, and a citizen planner, Kelly Beatty, who has some in-house expertise related to illumination and lighting technology. On October 8th, the Planning Board did hold their public hearing. They recommended approval of this article to town meeting. So this article is fairly straightforward. It seeks to accomplish three items. First one is to adopt reasonable regulation to permit all types of lighting technologies. These include fluorescent, incandescent, halogen, LED, whatever else may be out there or are coming in the future. Second is to create a balance between the new technology and community standards. This is related to light pollution and aesthetics. And finally, as I indicated, the industry is moving towards LED technology, so the bylaw seeks to address interests of the business community. In order to accomplish the desired outcome, the bylaw proposes several regulatory strategies. The first is to regulate the brightness and color temperature of the actual lamps. Again, we're focused on the illumination type. Second is to regulate daytime and nighttime operations. During the day, brightness would be allowed to be at a higher number, and at nighttime it would be required to be dimmed to an appropriate nighttime level. Third strategy is to adopt a singular measurement methodologies based upon the LEED standard created by the U.S. Green Building Council. Kelly will provide some additional information and technical response to what the methodologies speak to. And finally, and this is probably most important, the proposed bylaw maintains all the other existing sign regulations that remain in place. This is specific to a sign not being allowed to be animated, it cannot be moving. So in this particular case, when we speak to LED, the prohibitions that exist related to animation and signs that move would still remain prohibited. So at this point, I will ask Kelly to come up. He has a brief exhibit that describes tries to further describe the difference in what we're trying to do with the bylaw.
Thank you, Evan. So LED is a wonderful technology that is energy efficient, very cost effective for all of us, including businesses. A Nobel Prize was just awarded to the inventor of the blue LED, which makes a lot of the LEDs that are commonly used possible. When the town meeting at this time last year voted to prohibit LEDs, it was running counter to the overwhelming trend in the sign industry to use these wonderful lighting sources. And as the subcommittee explored this, we realized it really wasn't about the LEDs per se. It was about trying to control and regulate the way that our illuminated signs and signs in general occur in the town, in keeping with the character of the town. So we've left, the subcommittee and the planning board have left all of the intact, as Evan just said, all the existing signage requirements in terms of their size and how many they can be and how far away from the street. That's really not the issue. What we tried to address was 2 points. First of all, if you're going to have a sign that's illuminated, how bright can it be? Okay? You don't want it to be so bright as to be distracting, so bright as to be out of character with the town. We've all had experiences seeing illuminated signs in other communities. Route 101A in Nashua comes to mind, Amherst. And the second part, and this is the part that's really kind of forward-thinking, is we wanted to control what is called the color temperature of any lights that are used to illuminate a sign. Now, color temperature might sound like a complicated characteristic, but it really is not. You make a decision on color temperature every time you buy a light bulb. And in fact, this color temperature, which is measured in generally thousands of degrees, is on every light bulb that you buy. It's the decision you make whether you buy a daylight bulb or a soft white bulb. If you're buying compact fluorescence, a sort of outdoor character daylight bulb versus soft white. And the same is applying to LEDs too. Again, it's not the character of the individual type of light, but more the character of the color of the light from itself. And I'll show you just a moment here a demonstration that I showed to the Planning Board and the Board of Selectmen that really drives this point home. Stolen from my desk. I have two identically bright LED bulbs here. I'm going to turn them on. The one on your right, the one that looks bluer, has a color temperature of 5,000 Kelvin. The one on the right, your left, has a color temperature of 3,000 Kelvin. The lower the color temperature, the warmer the appearance of the light. So this 3,000 Kelvin standard is what we're proposing that you adopt as the default for any light that is shining on an otherwise inert sign to illuminate it. This does not apply, would not apply to any sign that's internally illuminated, but rather the light that's shining on it from the outside. And the reason for doing that is to make sure that that light is not overly harsh. There are a lot of environmental reasons why this warmer color temperature is preferable. The blue-rich light is detrimental to nocturnal wildlife. It creates more scattered light in the atmosphere, increases light pollution. For those of you who have reached that point in your life when your eyesight is starting to deteriorate, blue light creates more scatter within the eye. It is harsher to look at. It causes increased glare. It makes it more difficult to see at night. For all of these reasons, the Planning Board has adopted this 3,000 Kelvin standard. It is merely a way to control the color of the light that is used to illuminate from a sign externally. So again, to recap, we're trying to control how bright the signs will be using a standard measurement, which has a funny name. It's NITS, N-I-T-S, but this is what the industry is used to now. It's not something we made up. And also the color character of the illumination, again, using this color temperature, again, industry standard. The standards we chose are ultimately very defensible. The 2,000 nits for daytime use and 200 nits for nighttime are the ones adopted by the U.S. Green Building Council. It is what designers designed to. It's not something that's going to seem extreme or foreign to them. I guess that's about all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Now is the time for question and answer. Anyone have any questions?
Tom Fall, Precinct 5. How would you measure this if this wasn't, how would you enforce it, I guess is the best way to put it?
Enforcement's handled the same way signage and illumination-related signage is handled. The burden is always on the proponent. So if their first step is to apply to the building inspector, they provide the manufacturer's specification sheets, detail sheets. That manufacturer is designing that particular sign for that particular application. If the building inspector deems that it complies, it gets a sign permit. If it doesn't comply for the reason of the applicant is choosing not to comply, then it goes to the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Zoning Board of Appeals is also requesting the same information. They want to see the manufacturer specifications. Once a sign is up, and after the fact, if there's a complaint filed by an abutter or a citizen alleging that the sign is too bright, the building inspector, via enforcement, requests the same information from the sign owner. The town wants to see what the manufacturer specifications are. In the event that enforcement's required, the inspector can have the manufacturer come out, do an in-field test with essentially it's a piece of equipment that measures the brightness of the light. So there's a variety of options in order to do compliance and enforcement.
Follow-up question, would there be grandfathering involved in this? If, let's say I had a sign I've had there for years and I didn't meet your criteria, would that be grandfathered, or?
Yes, any existing sign that does not comply would be pre-existing non-conforming.
Okay,
So
thank you very
they'd be
much.
grandfathered.
Thank you.
Any more questions for the proponent?
Cheryl Perkins, Precinct 5. My question's not about illuminated signs, but it's just about what I read in the section 195-31 permitted signs in residential districts. So I look at the sizes that are indicated here in the different clauses: 1 square foot, 9 square feet, 6 square feet, 1 square foot, 25 square feet. And I'm just curious, how do those, in my opinion, overly large political signs that pop up every year, how do they fit in, and how are they, where do I find in the sign bylaw why those
Political
signs
are handled in a totally separate section.
Political signs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Political signs are essentially under case law or exempt from unreasonable regulation. So we do have a dedicated section in the zoning bylaw that speaks to political signs. However, what the provision says is that it's the town's desire and wish that exempt signage comply to the maximum extent practicable.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Jerry Lowe, Precinct 9. I'm just one clarification on what's changed. So you have internally illuminated signs, externally illuminated signs, and you crossed out light emitting diode signs, and we were just talking about LEDs. Are they now moved into internally illuminated signs? How is that? How are these all related?
Yeah, the simplest way to describe the proposal is that the bylaw is deleting the specific reference to LED and replacing it with nit and correlated color temperature.
Okay.
What's being proposed is applicable to both internal and external illumination.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any more questions? There being none, does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
Finance Committee takes no action on this article.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
Board of Selectmen unanimously recommends approval.
Does the Planning Board have a recommendation?
Planning Board unanimously recommends this article for approval.
Thank you. Now is the time for discussion.
Sue Carter, Precinct 2. I just want to say, when I first saw this article, I said, was Kelly Beatty involved? And obviously he was. And just thank you, Kelly, and that you're a great resource to the town. So we're lucky to have you.
George Zaharos, Precinct 3, also on the Planning Board. And I worked with Kelly, Evan, and Mike Raisback on the subcommittee, and I wanted to thank, on behalf of the Planning Board, Kelly's assistance in this matter. It's nice to have input from people in town, and we did hold public hearings, and Kelly was there for each and every one of them, as well as when we presented before the selectmen. So again, Kelly, thank you on behalf of the Planning Board.
Yeah, hi, Ed Root, Chairman of the Planning Board. I asked Kelly to be on the subcommittee, and I really appreciate him joining us. So again, thank you very much, Kelly.
There being no further discussion, now be the time to vote. This requires a 2/3 vote. One is to approve the bylaw change, the other, no, it would be to oppose it. So please vote now. The article passes, 126 in favor, 3 opposed, no abstentions. Article 13.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 13 is a home rule petition which pertaining to the issuance of liquor licenses to the Chelmsford Community Center and the Chelmsford Center for the Arts. What a home rule petition is basically it's a submittal by this body to the legislature in order for the town to basically obtain an exemption under state law. Under state law, and why we're here with this article this evening, the Board of Selectmen may not issue a permanent liquor license to itself, to the town, because of applicability under state law. The town cannot be in the business of conducting the sale of alcohol for profit, because it's really not a power that's granted to a municipality. And also, state law prohibits the town from paying any bills incurred for wines or liquors. What's going on here is we're following the lead of other communities in that the issuance of this license would help support the financial operations of the Chelmsford Center for the Arts and the Chelmsford Community Center because of the increasing desire by the public to obtain beer and wine and alcohol at functions that are held at those venues. And therefore, we're following the lead of other communities that run golf courses and other art centers and so forth to get the special permission. So with this, I'll turn it over to Sue Gates, who is the genesis of this article and the director of the Chelmsford Center for the Arts.
Thank you. Susan Gates, and I'm from Precinct 7. I am not a town meeting rep, though. As chairman of the Chelmsford Center for the Arts, appointed by the town manager to run the CC on behalf of the town, we are asking you to support this article. The Chelmsford Center for the Arts is a town function. We are not an outside organization. I act on behalf of the Board of Selectmen and the town manager to run the Chelmsford Center for the Arts, and the committee that's appointed for the Chelmsford Community Center does the same. So as was stated, the article before you seeks your approval to ask for this special legislation, which then allows the Board of Selectmen to grant potentially the liquor licenses. The reason for this request is that currently, in order to serve or sell alcohol, we must ask for one-day licenses, and we're limited to 30 per year. The CCA is self-supporting and must raise more than $75,000 a year just to stay open. So having the ability to sell wine and beer at events during intermission, at concerts and plays, is something our customers have actually asked us about. They expect this. It's an amenity expected of professional venues, which is what we are developing at the Chelmsford Center for the Arts. So we respectfully ask town meeting to support this article, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but this is, what you see is what you get. This is just for legislation to allow the Board of Selectmen to make a decision about granting these licenses.
Good evening. I'm speaking on behalf of the Chelmsford Community Center. When this first came up, when the town manager brought it to us, I was surprised that we hadn't included the community center. So the wording was added, and for all the same reasons that the previous speaker has stated, to run a self-supporting type of operation there. We would also like to have a license for the the North Town Hall or the Chelmsford Community Center. And I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Normally, we would go straight to question and answer. However, there are two amendments, and I think for the sake of expediency, if the proponent of the amendments wants to appear, and then questions can be had of the proponent of the underlying as well as the proponent of the amendment. So.
Thank you. Well, I really have a problem with the town, the liability of the town holding the license and serving liquor, number one. And I think that the wording of all alcoholic beverages could be amended just for beer and wine only. I'm not, it just seems to me that the town will be getting more involved.
Yeah, would you please explain just your specific amendment, okay?
Okay. In section 1, actually, in Article 13, it says the whole license is for the sale of all alcoholic beverages. And then in section 1, it says, where it says sale of all alcoholic beverages, my amendment would be just to make it beer and wine and not all alcoholic beverages. And also to delete section 2, where it does say that the town of Chelmsford may pay bills incurred for the purchase of alcoholic beverages. I'm not really sure how it works now. My understanding is that vendors coming in would take the responsibility of purchasing the alcohol. It appears to me that Chelmsford tax money would be paying for alcohol, and I just don't think that's right.
Okay. So now, are you done with your presentation, Karen?
No, that's it.
Okay, so now what I'm recommending is that we'll have question and answer. You can ask the questions of the proponent of the amendment or of the underlying warrant article to get clarification on all party sides. Okay?
Well, should we respond to this? I mean,
Mr. Moderator, just a response. The concern we have on this proposed amendment, particularly to strike section 2, which would not allow us to pay bills, basically it would render the article worthless. I mean, the bottom line is if we're going to operate, you know, the community center or the North or the Center for the Arts or the Center or the Chelmsford Community Center, and we're going to supply whether it be beer or wine or alcoholic beverages, we have to make payment to the distributors for those products. And if you strike the language that says we can't pay the bills incurred with this, then basically we're not going to be operational. And the assertion that we're going to use tax dollars is not accurate. Basically, as was noted earlier, it's a self-supporting operation. The revenue that comes in, you know, to the events that are held there, such as the recent Oktoberfest, pays for the expenses of those events. It's not tax dollars. We do not basically run checks out through, you know, through the tax levy to pay for those type of events. There, as was noted earlier by the speaker, those events are self-supporting, and they have stayed in the black, and we do monitor them, you know, on a quarterly basis and then monthly at the end of the fiscal year. So the bottom line is we really oppose the amendments. The other issue about the town doing this is, as was noted earlier, we do this currently. There's 30 of these are allowed per year of one-day special licenses, and the town is partaking in this activity. So that's what's taking place right now, and yes, we do have liability, and if this is granted, we will get a formal liability policy for the permanent license. However, we also have to have, like any other license holder, you have to have adequately trained staff people who are serving the alcohol, you know, tip certified or other functions. So that would take place under this article. And then the difficulty is if you limit it to beer and wine only, we can't grant special one-day licenses to a permanent license holder. So if you limit it to beer and wine, if that's what the amendment is and that's approved, you could not have a wedding or other function where you might want to serve other types of alcoholic beverages. So basically you would, in essence, again, we think limit the type of activities, whether it be bridal showers, you know, and other activities at these events. So again, we would ask that these amendments not be supported.
Thank you, but question and answer, do you have any questions for anybody?
Well, If we're talking about liability and getting insurance, will that also be paid with the funds?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I
No,
can-
there's people behind you. I don't know if you were going to ask more questions.
No, well, I think at this point, I could withdraw. I didn't fully understand.
Okay. You also had a second amendment. Are you withdrawing that as
Yes,
well?
yeah.
Thank
All right,
you.
sorry.
Glenn Thorne, Precinct 5. Do you have any idea how many events during the course of a year we might have for the Center at the Arts or North Town Hall Community Center?
I can't speak, obviously, for the Chelmsford Community Center, but we now have, I'm a retired volunteer. We have virtually every weekend some kind of a performance. Does that mean that at every single one we would sell beer or wine in the intermission? Probably not. But what's limiting us is we have a gallery, for example, and if we have an opening for an artist and you want to have wine and cheese and where people are getting this much wine, we can't even do that because if we have 12 openings a year, we've now at 12, from 30. Now, if you had one event every week, that's 52 right there. So it's just limiting us.
So I was looking for whether it was, like 5 times a year, 10 times a year, but it could be 30 times a year.
Oh, easily.
Okay, I was trying to get an idea
No,
of the
I'm
scope.
sorry, yes.
And does Selectman Joyce have any idea how many events might be at the community center?
I can only guess based on seeing their calendar that every weekend they usually have at least one event going, and sometimes two. And while they're not the same type of event as that Susan puts on, they are events like showers and wedding rehearsals.
So again, it's going to be a large number, if I'm understanding correctly,
Yeah.
20, 30, 40 a year?
Yeah.
Thank you
could
very
be,
much.
Yes.
Will Wagner, Precinct 8. Question for the previous speakers. Where is the funding from this coming?
I'm glad you asked this because it gives me another chance to explain to people who are watching on television especially that neither the Chelmsford Community Center nor the Chelmsford Center for the Arts have any funding at all for the running of our programs or our buildings. We raise every single penny. So last year, for example, we raised more than $76,000, and it was all necessary to pay for the overhead and the running of the programs. We do this as volunteers. And I'm thinking that to expand our programming, which we're doing currently, that we'll need to raise $100,000 a year to run, and this is with no employees. So having the ability to be able to provide this amenity at our functions helps us in generating revenue to support our programs. But money for neither program comes from the town coffers.
Just a continuation of the question. The town manager mentioned that you'd have to have TIP certified servers and things like that. So where would the funding for their training come from? Out of your own internal budget?
Well, what we do is when we go for a one-day license, we have to use TIP certified people. Some of us are TIP certified, but we actually use bartenders who are already TIP certified. So the town would not pay for TIP certification.
And those bartenders are paid out of your
Yes, everything
internal.
comes out, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
That would be the same for the Chelmsford Community Center as well. We have several people on the board up there that are TIP certified, so even internally we have them.
Laura Merrill, District 2. Regarding liability, if you have a year-long license, where does the alcohol get stored? And how do we know that no one can get access to it when there's not an event going on, or when there is an event going on, but there's other things going on too?
Well, we actually have a locked closet. it's actually a vault inside of a locked closet.
So,
but,
so does that mean we have alcohol in there today?
Well, we have some because we have been allowed to have one-day licenses, and if we had closed, unopened bottles open, yes, we do have a few bottles. It's not like we have a liquor store locked up in the closet.
But presumably, if we were to get a license for beer, wine, and pretty much a full bar, then there'd be a lot more alcohol stored on these premises, or is that taken away from the catering service, or?
No, we would store what we need. We would buy what we needed, and we would, if there was any left, we would hang on to it. But we're not talking about cases and cases of product. But that's really for the Board of Selectmen to, when they decide when they grant a license, whether we adequately.
And my last question is, of the staff that's working on these events, how many of them are under the age of 21?
None.
Thank you.
Tom Fall, Precinct 5. If you were to get this license, would there be any time restraints as far as, when you could serve and couldn't serve? Or would that be up to the Board of Selectmen to decide?
That's up to the granting authority, I believe. But I mean, normally, in our building, we have said we don't have anything goes past 11 p.m. anyway.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any additional questions for the proponent? There being none, does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
Finance Committee takes no action on this article.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
Board of Selectmen unanimously recommends approval.
Is there any discussion on this article? There being none, we'll vote on this. A yes vote will be in the affirmative. Obviously, the yes vote would be in the affirmative. It means that you approve the warrant article.
Kelly Beatty for Chelmsford Telemedia. One of the things that Sue Gates, one of the previous speakers, has mentioned to me is that because the Chelmsford Community Center for the Arts is heated by electricity, over the winter months she gets some staggeringly high electric bills. And I have
The article
watched,
passes 120 in favor, 7 opposed.
I have watched from the sidelines as she struggled to make
Article on our
ends
agenda
meet.
for this evening is Article 14.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. I call upon John Souza, our Finance Director, Treasurer Collector, to address the body on this article. He can speak firsthand as the difficulties had, which has brought this request brought forward.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. The genesis for this article really came about 4 to 5 months ago. I was contacted by the fire department to assist in my role as treasurer collector, to assist them with the collection of a rather large unpaid fire detail. And I began to explore some of the legal options, because a fire or a police detail is a little different than the usual methods that we use for taxes and things of that nature. So in consultation with town council, we began to do a little research just to see what options were available. And I was asked to do a little research and with the town clerk, and we found that the town really had never considered adopting the statute before. I am pleased to report the town meeting that we did ultimately collect the fire detail. It was about $24,000. It was paid to the town in late September. Just in doing a little research before bringing this article forward, right here in the Merrimack Valley, I've contacted a few other treasurers in the surrounding towns. Billerica and Drake had adopted this statute some years ago for various fees, and the town of Westford is considering it. The way this statute works is the staff at the police and fire department would first make a number of attempts to collect the bill for the detail. If ultimately that goes unpaid after a certain amount of time, and they contact my office. They would just fill out the legal paperwork. It would go to the assessor's office and then come to me as tax collector. And if the bill still goes unpaid, a lien would be recorded at the Middlesex Registry of Deeds and until the bill is paid, and then a release of lien would then be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. I'd be glad to answer any questions on it.
This is question and answer period. Apparently there are none. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
Finance Committee unanimously recommends its approval.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
Board of Selectmen unanimously recommends approval.
Now's the time for discussion. Any discussion? Apparently not. A vote yes means that you're in favor of the new municipal charges lien. A no would be against it. Please vote now. The article passes 122 to 2 with one abstention. Please, I will entertain a motion to adjourn until, not adjourn, to continue the hearing until November 17th. All in favor? Opposed? Please don't forget to take your electronic voting devices and to the checkers out front. Thank you very much.
And so despite the fact that we have these fancy voting machines, the motion to recess until November 17th was a voice vote and an overwhelmingly resounding yes. Here we are about 2.5 hours into this process. We had a 14-article warrant, of which 6 of those were not discussed tonight. So we only went through 8 articles, and it was interesting in all kinds of ways, including me being up there at the podium for the first time ever. That was interesting too. Anyway, as we expected, the citizen petition to amend the town charter so that the zoning board of appeals would be elected rather than appointed was the sort of hot button item for the evening. Drew the most debate, was the longest discussion, and ultimately was defeated. It is a complicated process that we have here in town to make sure that all of the various boards that are necessary for the functioning of our town are staffed with qualified people. I spent much of the summer working with the planning board, and I can tell you that those people really know their stuff. Same for the school committee and the board of selectmen and all the other commissions, the health department and so forth. So I think we should be grateful that we have a town with so much volunteerism, and I think it's incumbent upon us to keep an eye on this process and to make sure that the people we have working on our behalf really are the best qualified. As was pointed out, many of these positions are appointed by the town manager and then approved by the Board of Selectmen. And as I think Glenn Thorne pointed out, the system ain't broke in most cases anyway. So until November 17th, I'm Kelly Beatty for our terrific staff at Chelmsford Telemedia. And we want to sign off for the evening, and we look forward to seeing you here on November 17th. Good night.